Well, I have 7 o'clock, so we're going to get this meeting started. Welcome to the second online session of the 2020 Hopkinton School Meeting. Jim, I'm going to surprise you again and ask for that lovely statement on 91A.
Should have been prepared. We are conducting this meeting virtually, so there is no physical location for this meeting. It's all being done via Zoom, and then there is a YouTube live link as well as a phone option. And we're able to do this due to the governor issuing a state of emergency and executive orders that allow for public bodies, such as the school board, to conduct their business virtually because of COVID-19. And so aside from the ability for boards to do meetings virtually, all the other aspects of RSA 91A, which is the open meeting law, or otherwise known as the right to know law, is being followed. And so we'll be taking minutes. We're recording the session so people can watch it later. But for purposes of tonight, due to the governor's emergency declaration, we are conducting our business this evening completely virtually.
Thank you. Because we had some technical difficulties with the Pledge of Allegiance and National Anthem on Tuesday, I would like to ask Steve to replay those, hopefully with better luck this time around.
Steve? That is my goal. Thank you. And I apologize for the first event, but we're going to try it again. So in a moment, would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance by Deb Jones, Sheila Conley, and Corinne LaJoy.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we're going to, now we're going to move to Aaron Donahue, Brianna Sink, and Colby Malcolm, and the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you, Steve, and to those lovely singers from the high school. Before we start in with today's agenda, I'd like to say that there's a chance of a significant power loss during tonight's meeting due to inclement weather. If that should happen, I will recess this meeting for Thursday, May 21st at 7 p.m. in a similar format, with voting next Saturday, May 23rd from 9 to 1 at the high school. If this happens, we will do our best to notify voters on such short notice, by posting on the school district website, Facebook pages, and the town Facebook pages. I will then be at the high school tomorrow to inform voters who may not have received word and still arrive hoping to vote. The loss of power to a small number of people will not recess this meeting unless I am the one person who loses power and am unable to perform my duties as moderator. While unfortunate, this would be akin to asking us to delay our regular meeting because someone's car wouldn't start. The disruption tonight must be significant. However unlikely a scenario, this requirement will also eliminate the opportunity of an individual to manipulate the system by claiming a loss of power. Our session tonight will be focused on tomorrow's voting procedures, the ballot, with the proposed amendments to the warrant, followed by a period of public comment and Q&A on each article. Following the public comment period, I will again but quickly go over the voting procedures. Tonight's panelists include the outgoing board and who are responsible for developing the warrant, as well as the current board who is tasked with its implementation. I would now ask Jim and Liz to make introductions.
Liz, would you like to go first?
Sure. I would just like to introduce the members of the board of 2019-2020. I am Liz Duran. I'm the previous chair of the board. And tonight with us is Matt Belanger and Bill Chapin. Norm Goupel and Jim O'Brien were the other two members of the school board who remain on the 2020-21 board.
Thanks, Liz. Hello, my name is Jim O'Brien. I'm currently serve as chair of the school board. And with me tonight, or with us tonight, is the board vice chair, Andrea Folsom, Norm Goupel, excuse me, Rob Nato, and Seth Aframe.
Thank you, Jim. Did you have any other additional opening comments for this time, or would you like those later?
It's up to you, Mr. Moderator, when you want me to do them. I have a presentation that it's probably a 10-minute or so presentation, and so I will wait whenever you would like me to do it.
Is it regarding more on the articles, which would be better later?
Yes, there's some context to it, and then gets into some budget issues that I think would be valuable to the voters.
Let's wait until we're closer to the budget then. How's that?
I serve at your pleasure.
Thank you. For tonight's session, when public comment period is open and you wish to add to the conversation, please click the raise your hand button on your screen. I will then call on the screen name. Steve will enable you to unmute yourself so that we can hear your comment. For tonight's meeting, because some may or are joining us by phone, we have disabled the chat and Q&A functions on Zoom. All comments and questions must be made during the public comment periods on each article by using the raise your hand function. The removal of chat and Zoom Q&A is the only way we can assure all comments are correctly reflected in the minutes while reducing distraction and the opportunity for anonymous comments. When commenting, please state your name and address for the minutes. For the voting procedures tomorrow, voting will be open from 9 to 1 at the high school. I ask that those with last names beginning with letters A through K vote between 9 and 11, and L through Z from 11 to 1. You will not be turned away, however, for voting outside these requested times. If you are in line to check in by 1 o'clock, you will be allowed to vote. Please use the Park Avenue entrance and proceed behind the school to check in with the supervisors of the checklists. There will be 2 lines. Please use either. To check in, please keep your windows up and either show your driver's license to the assistant or say your name and address loud enough for the assistant to hear you. The assistants will help guide you through the process. The assistants will then relay your information to the supervisors and place a card on your car window with the number of voters in your car. This will help me ensure that the correct number of ballots are cast at the box. After checking in, it's time to vote. You can either print your ballot at home. They are available for download at the school district website, or you can get a ballot and pencil from the check-in assistant if you need one. I have heard that there have been some statements and posts and resulting confusion about whether ballots printed at home must be double or single-sided. It does not matter. They can be either one. If double-sided, that's fine. Single-side is as well. Pursuant to RSA 40:4-G, If I can determine the voter's intent, the vote shall be counted. Plain and simple. Double or single-sided printing will not affect the determination of voter intent. If you get a ballot at the high school, there will be an area to park to fill it out before proceeding to the ballot box. Once you are ready to submit your ballot, please pull around to the ballot box. It will be alongside the gym. I will take the card showing the number of voters in your car as you show me the ballots to ensure the correct number are being submitted. I will signal you that you are good to vote and back away so you can lower your window and put your ballot in the box. You will then be able to drive away and await the news of the results. Please vote on each article and amendment. Many of you may have seen the article in the Concord Monitor, which was not clear of the process or, of that process. Again, please vote yes or no on each and every article, question, and motion to amend. As a reminder, voting is tomorrow, Saturday, not today, as was mentioned in the letter to the editor and the Monitor, I believe today or earlier this week, or maybe it was yesterday. Please keep in mind the check-in line and voting areas are the area of the school meeting, equivalent to being inside the gym in regular years. Just as no one would electioneer inside the gym, please do not do so on school property tomorrow. Voter harassment or interference will not be allowed or tolerated. After voting ends, I, along with several assistants, will count and recount the ballots, announce the results on the school district website, school district and town Facebook pages. Now on with tonight's specific items. I would like to thank the voters who submitted over 100 comments, questions, and proposed amendments by email and voicemail. I received 37 requests to amend Article 3, the operating budget. All of these comments, questions, and proposed amendments will be included in the minutes and were posted on the school district website yesterday afternoon. I received several other amendment requests that did not make it onto the ballot, and I will discuss these later. There were 2 comments that I did not include because the address was not included and I could not verify that they were made by town residents. There were several requests that would not have been valid, even if approved, for proposed amendments, because they were not properly warned by changing the subject matter of an article or tried to bind the decision-making capabilities of future meetings. Additionally, there was one comment made by a non-resident taxpayer who lives in and votes in Massachusetts. As with past practice, this comment was not included because we typically do not allow non-registered voters to speak, except for students, administrators, and council, and other small exceptions. Following this meeting, however, I will forward the comment onto the school board for their consideration. Deciding the ballot amendments was much harder for me than I thought, but with guiding principle of putting forth amendments that will determine the will of the voters while trying to make this meeting feel and operate as closely to normal as possible, I believe the voters will have their day to exercise their democratic freedoms and inform our community of how they feel. I'm sure the moment you've all been waiting for to see the choices you have on tomorrow's ballot. The ballot became available on the school district website this afternoon. It will remain available throughout the voting period. As well, ballots will be available at check-in. The first question on the ballot provides you the opportunity to approve the proposed procedures and rules for this meeting. If you agree with the proposed rules and want to see the warrant articles decided in this manner, then you would vote yes. As with a regular meeting, the meeting is able to overrule the decisions made by the moderator. To do so, you would vote no on whether or not to approve the proposed rules. If the rules are not approved, no other votes will be counted, and I will recess the meeting for another day with another set of rules to consider the entire warrant with a clean slate in terms of amendments and presentations. Article 2 is to approve SB 2. Article 4, the teacher's contract, and Article 6, the Teamsters contract, are not able to be amended and will appear on the ballot as such. Articles 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 also appear on the ballot as presented due to a lack of motions to amend. There were several motions to amend these articles to 0. However, the better way to achieve that result is simply by voting no instead of through the amendment process. That leaves us with Article 3. starting in the order in which the motions will appear on the ballot. Again, with the goal of determining the will of the voters, the following motions to amend will appear on the ballot. Article 3, Motion 1. Are you in favor of amending the proposed operating budget to $19,533,045, a decrease of $1,883,236, and also approving the operating budget as amended by this vote? There were 10 requests for this amended budget amount, as well as one in the nearby figure of $19,500,000 even, which I think is a reasonable accommodation to include the number that will appear on the article or on the motion to amend. If motion 1 fails, then Article 3, Motion 2. Are you in favor of amending the proposed operating budget to $20,033,045, a decrease of $1,383,236, and also approving the operating budget as amended by this vote? There were 4 requests substantially for this amount. If motions 1 and 2 fail, then Article 3, Motion 3. If the above motions failed, then are you in favor of amending the proposed budget to $20,533,045, a decrease of $883,286, and also approving the operating budget as amended by this vote? This is the so-called flat budget. There were 17 requests for this amended budget amount. If the above motions fail, Article 3, Motion 4. If the above motion failed, then are you in favor of amending the proposed operating budget to $21 million, a decrease of $416,331, and also approving the operating budget as amended by this vote? There was a single request made on Tuesday for this amount, but I feel that it is important to include an option between last year's budget and the proposed budget if voters want that option. If that motion fails, Article 3, Motion 5. If the above motion failed, then are you in favor of amending the proposed operating budget to $21,616,331, an increase of $200,000, and also approving the operating budget as amended by this vote? There were 4 requests for increases between $100,000 and $300,000, and I chose the midpoint of $200,000 as a reasonable accommodation for those requests. If all of the above motions fail, then it would be time to call the question as presented. Article 3, as proposed by the Budget Committee and School Board. If all the above motions failed, are you in favor of the operating budget as proposed of $21,416,331? As a reminder, please vote yes or no on each and every motion to Article 3. With this many options, I was unable to keep the ballot to a single page, so please also vote on the articles on the second page as well. As a quick example, if you are in favor of no changes to the proposed budget, you would likely vote no on all of the motions to amend and yes for the proposed budget. If, on the other hand, you are in favor of budget cuts, you would likely vote yes to the amendments you believe are appropriate and no on the other options. The critical aspect here is that we won't know which option will first receive a majority vote, so it is important to vote yes or no on each and every option. A majority vote will be determined by the number of votes cast for that individual question or motion only. Before we get into additional comments, questions, and answers, are there any questions on voting or the ballot at this time from the audience? From the meeting, I should say, I'm sorry. Any questions from the meeting? I see Catherine Giordano has a hand raised. Steve, can we bring her across? Catherine, if you have a comment, question, you can unmute yourself. Okay. We're having some problems. Catherine, if you, we'll put you back on the hold list and bring over, I'm assuming it's going to be Arnold Coda.
Yes, it is.
Yep, go ahead.
On Article 3, motions 1 and 2, there was a difference in the amount between what is printed and what you read. On Article 3, Motion 1, it reads $1,883,286, you told us 1,883,236. And similarly, on Article 3, Motion 2, the same difference on those last three digits from 286, you said 236. So would you?
You are correct, Arnold. I misspoke. The ballot is correct. Let me reread Article 3, Motion 1 for clarity. Are you in favor of amending the proposed operating budget to $19,533,045, a decrease of $1,883,286? Is that right, Arnold?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Okay.
And then
Then on Article 3, Motion 2, again, the ballot is correct. I misspoke. The proposed operating budget, the request for amendment to the proposed operating budget to $20,033,045, a decrease of $1,383,286.
Yep. Thank you, James.
Arnold, for that clarification.
Sure. Thank you.
Suzanne Meyer, Steve, can we bring her across, please?
Hi,
Yes, go ahead, Suzanne.
Suzanne Meyer, 224 Hopkins Green in Hopkinton. So just to be clear, you vote yes for the budget you're in favor of and no to the rest. Is that correct?
If you are interested in only one number, you would vote yes on that. You can vote yes on multiple options. If you are in favor, for example, for budget cuts, you may very well vote yes on Motion 1, the biggest decrease. And if that fails, then you would vote yes for the next biggest and so forth. So you can vote yes on any or all options.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Thank you for the question. It's important we get this right and everybody understands. Ken Wasson. Go ahead, Ken.
That's how they pronounce my name north of the border, but not so much down here. It's all good. And just a quick, easy one is the
I'm sorry, could you
controversy on the single-sided, double-sided thing. I get that, and any of that doesn't matter, but do you want them stapled if it's single-sided?
I'm sorry, Ken, could you state your name and address just for the record?
Sorry, my bad. Yes,
No, that's
Ken
okay.
Wasson, Clark Lane.
Thank you. Stapling or not stapled does not matter. Again, that won't affect the voter intent, determination of voter intent.
I understand. What would you prefer?
I actually have no preference.
Okay, perfect.
The copies we will be handing out, if you need one, I believe will be stapled. Steve is nodding his head, so those will be stapled, but whatever is easier, I do not want to be a burden on the voters.
Okay, I'll save my staples. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Let's try Catherine Giordano one more time, Steve. Catherine, if you can unmute yourself. Okay. Let's move on then. It doesn't look like we have any other comments. Now to see where I was in my notes.
I'm sorry, James, can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes, go ahead, Matthew. Matt.
One thing that I just want to, I think is important for voters to understand, the sequence of of this is, to me, the most important aspect. So the way that it will work is you will progress down, or they will count from motion 1 to motion 5. It is the first motion that reaches 60% that is approved. It is
50%,
not
50%, simple majority.
50%. So even if 90% of voters vote yes on called motion 4, if motion 1 gets 50% yes, then it is approved. Is that accurate?
It is accurate. However, once motion 1 passes, we will never know what happens to motion 4. Once I will not count all of the motions, as I will count them in order, one at a time. Once we achieve a majority, counting on Article 3 stops. So we will not know what those other votes would be.
Understood. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, with that, I would like to ask Liz to move the warrant with proposed motions to amend it as described by the ballot.
Sorry, James, I need to bring that up on my screen. I just lost it. Just disappeared. Give me just a moment.
And Jim, get ready because I'm going to ask you.
I think it went into my background. Hold on. As I was changing the screen. Okay, just a minute. I'm sorry. Okay, let me see if I got it right here. All right. Okay, so I'll take a motion we're going to start with Article 1, correct?
No, we can just move the entire
Okay,
warrant
as we spoke. Okay, great. I will take,
with motions.
correct. Oh, okay, great. As we spoke, I will take a motion to move the entire warrant for the annual school district meeting of 2020 as presented with the amendments included.
Thank you for that motion. Jim, would you like to second that?
Sure, I second that motion.
Thank you very much. Now we will just get into the discussion on the questions on the ballot. The first one.
James, I'm sorry to interrupt. Is this an appropriate time to give the brief presentation to sort of set some context and answer some questions that have come in pertaining to the budget that I think may be helpful?
Well, I was going to start with question 1, which is the approving the rules or not. So I think your presentation probably doesn't touch on that. So if you hold on a little bit, if that makes sense. Yep. Okay, for questions and answers on question 1, whether or not to approve the proposed rules and procedures and rules, I received comments and questions from 7 people in the offline comment period, with several individuals making several points. Multiple comments were made voicing displeasure with my decision to not allow questions in the first session and instead saving them until tonight. I made that decision because I envisioned Tuesday's session was focusing on the outgoing board's presentation of the warrant, with tonight's having both boards available to answer questions about the warrant as presented, as well as how the decisions will be implemented by the new board. If I had to do this format again, would I do things differently? Yes, I would. I now think the difference of allowing Q&A in both sessions would have allowed for a better give and take between the voters and the school boards earlier in the process. However, this decision was not a fatal flaw to the meeting. Based on the number, consistency, and range of the amendment requests, I believe similar figures would have been requested and that voters have adequate opportunity to ask questions through email, voicemail, as well as tonight. 2 comments were made about the offline comment period and the summary versus availability of information. The offline comments became available to the voters by sharing them on the school district website yesterday afternoon. Another voter added that this process was heavy-handed and contrary to the intent of the meeting, which is to allow voters to gain understanding and information. I asked that everybody read these comments made during the offline period so that everyone can be better informed. I believe that providing this manner of comment is important, however, to allow the most people to comment in a variety of ways, including by phone or for those uncomfortable with Zoom or other online formats. Another comment asked about the chat function. I had said that the chat function would not be included in the minutes as an official record. And when I saw the comments were becoming vitriolic, I decided that it was becoming a distraction and detracting from the meeting. I therefore made the decision to turn it off. As stated earlier tonight, it is also off for tonight. Another comment said that rules should be approved to continue a functioning government and reminds us that the rules apply only for this year. Another comment said, quote, if you were truly interested in getting the temperature of town and including a broad spectrum of people who pay the major share of your budget, you would vacate this meeting on your own in favor of the special meeting that is contemplated by the presentation should any of the warrants fail. Just because you have the right to proceed as you are doesn't mean that it is the right thing to do, end quote. I would respond that I am hopeful in the democratic process proposed here this year. I would add that it's only Articles 5 and 7 for special meetings that would have special meetings and not any warrants failing. Additionally, special meetings are not allowed to appropriate funds unless allowed to do so under a court order or through the format of a contingent vote is proposed this year with Articles 5 and 7. Seeking such a court order would burden the school district with additional legal fees. Another comment was made to state that the voter will not be supporting the proposed rules based on Tuesday's session's lack of back and forth and the voter's belief that the format this year is inherently flawed. Lastly, there were several procedural questions, including a request about how to make a comment by raising your hand, which I addressed earlier this evening, and where the results will be posted on the school district website, school Facebook page, and most likely we'll try to get it over to the town Facebook page as soon as those are available. The final question was asked about approving these procedures. The question is the first one on the ballot. Only after that question is counted and passes will other questions be counted and considered. In a way, all ballot questions are contingent upon the meeting approving the proposed rules. There will not be any need to drive through and vote multiple times. If the rules are not adopted, no other votes will be counted and the meeting will be recessed to meet again with different rules. With that, I would open the meeting to comments and questions on the proposed rules and their approval or rejection as provided in the first question. As a reminder, like our regular meetings, please refrain from making duplicative comments and keep comments and questions to less than 3 minutes. I will prioritize first-time speakers. Are there any comments or questions for question 1, the proposed procedures and rules? Lori Warner. You can unmute yourself.
Did we get us?
Yes, go ahead. Sounds more like Dale than Lori.
Well, Lori runs a computer. I haven't the slightest clue.
If you
and that brings my question. Well, for
I'm
one,
sorry.
James.
Your name and address.
Dale Warner on Kearsarge Ave. James, is phenomenal what you're doing. I don't know how you managed to do that. But my question is, I'm not the computer guy, and I'm sure I'm not the only one in town. What accommodations have you folks made to address the people who aren't computer savvy?
For the participation in the online sessions like tonight, we do have just a straight phone call-in number, and we will have printed ballots available on Saturday. In addition, we put the word out via a townwide mailer put together by the school board. And Jim and Steve, do you have any other things to add?
No, I think that covers it.
I have one other question. There was a mailer that was sent out. I've heard some people talking about a mailer. We never got one. I don't even know what that mailer was about.
That mailer was put out by the school board, included the proposed rules, the dates and format for the meeting, as well as some frequently asked, some FAQs, frequently asked questions and answers to how this format would proceed. I'm sorry you didn't get one. They had set it up to be dropped off in every mailbox, every address in town, including post office boxes.
Okay, I was just curious on that question because I didn't get one. I only got that information from talking with other people.
Okay, wonderful thing about the community that word gets around, and sorry it didn't get to you.
Okay, no problem. Again, thanks for what you're doing, James.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Don C. Go ahead.
I'm wondering,
Where does Dale live? Does anybody know? What did he say?
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said, did Dale say where he lived?
Yes, he did, on Kearsarge Avenue.
Behind me in the meadows, according to Dave, the guy that owns it, nobody down there got it either.
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
So that's a population of older people that don't know what's going on.
I will look into that and see if the lack of that mailer, it creates a problem that makes this meeting unworkable. I will make that determination and announce that tomorrow, but at this point, we're going to press forward.
Okay.
Thank you very much for that comment. Seeing no other comments, we're going to move on to Article 2 on SB2. The comments made that opposed SB2 stated reasons, including low participation rates in the deliberative session, resulting in an ill-informed electorate, the perception that many towns who have switched are now displeased with the format, and a lack of improved convenience because there are now 2 sessions to attend, the deliberative session and the voting session. Another comment said the school board did not give a clear picture of the correct process once SB2 is implemented, and requested the following statement be read. From the New Hampshire Municipal Association, legally there is still a town meeting, but instead of one session where debate and final voting on warrant articles takes place, there are 2 separate town sessions, deliberative and voting. The deliberative session is similar to the traditional town meeting. During this meeting, all articles are explained, discussed, debated, and amended. These articles, as presented or amended, are then placed on the official ballot and voted on at the second session. This voting session takes place in the voting booth where citizens vote on all warrant articles. The comment continues to state that it is important that residents of Hopkinton are given the facts so they can make an informed decision. The first question on Article 2 was asking whether or not the suggested vote is for a default budget. No, the vote tomorrow is on whether or not the school district meeting will adopt the rules and processes of SB2 for future meetings. There is no default budget as a function of this year's meeting. That would only be part of future meetings if this article passes. Jim, would you like to add anything else to that answer? Okay, I will now open Article 2 for comments and questions. Don C. Go ahead, Don, you can unmute yourself and.
I really just had my hand up on one of those. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. So nothing to add on SB2 then? Thanks. Okay, let's go to Dennis Goddard then.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Actually, I, despite years of video game training, managed to not raise my hand at quite the right time. On your prior statement, you mentioned that you would make a determination about whether we would go forward based on whether or not folks had been properly notified that lived in that community. I'm curious as to what your decision-making process will be. How will you determine whether or not notifying them or them not getting this particular notification would be some kind of cause? And then related to that, if any given motion were to pass or fail by a margin smaller than the population of voters in that community, how would that affect our perception of this process? Thank you.
I would start that I need to figure out how many people may or may not have received this. This is the first I'm hearing of any problem like this, which is understandable. I'd also like to hear if by not receiving it, they were totally unaware of it. As the commenter said earlier, he did not receive one, but he heard about it, which to me means there's no harm at that stage. So I need to figure out what exactly happened, how much information is out there. Did these people, are they truly ignorant of the facts surrounding this meeting or not by not having this mailer? It does not change the fact that the meeting is properly warned in any way, shape, or form. So it's very low right now. I would say it's a low risk of a low chance of me stopping the process at this point for that reason. And was there another comment you had? I can't remember. I'm sorry if there was another point.
That'll do. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Team Rollo.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Mike Rollo. I'm a resident of 1998 Hopkinton Road. And like the previous speaker, I want to say thank you for your leadership. This is not an easy process in normal times. So I send all the praise in the world and you all trying to get this through this year. But I'm speaking today in opposition to Article 2. I have lived under Senate Bill 2, the official ballot voting. In the town that we lived in previous to this, we saw participation go down dramatically, actually, especially via the deliberative session, where we would have 100 show up for town meeting. You would have 20, if we were lucky, show up for deliberative sessions. And then there was never any change in how many people actually turned out to vote on election day. So it is true that you have a two-part system where you'll have a deliberative session and an actual day of voting, but they don't happen like today where we're having this conversation and then we're voting tomorrow. There's a quite lengthy set of time in between. And the experience that I've had was this was a time for, to put it no other way, but shenanigans and spreading misinformation, which is really contrary to the good of the town, I would say. I would urge all of my fellow residents to vote no on this article. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Owner. Go ahead with your name and address, please.
Adams on Kearsarge Ave. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of your name.
Renee Adams.
Thank you.
Kearsarge Ave. I want to thank you for trying so hard to make this work during this time, because it's a one in a lifetime, I hope, time. But this does not match what it is to be in the room and hear what my neighbor Dale thinks about what the vote is, or what an elderly person has to say about how it will affect him or her, how a farmer feels that a certain warrant article will affect that person. Very often in town meeting and in school board meeting, I've come in believing that I want to vote one way, and I've heard how my neighbors are affected in one way or another, and it's changed my mind, and I've voted a different way. I tell people in other states and my friends and my family that I participate in true democracy when I come to a town meeting, and I'm from Philadelphia, where it all started. So, and anything I've heard about SB2 has been about less participation, not more participation. So I ask the people in town to please don't give up town and school meetings in person, because it is American democracy. Thanks.
Thank you. Peter. Peter, you can unmute yourself and then state your name and address.
Peter Unich, 931 Gould Hill Road. I'd like to make two observations. Number one, the voting process is remarkably similar to what would happen with SB2. We have the ballot, and we can consider the ballot in the quiet of our own homes, make our determinations, and vote anonymously. And there's so that this might be a good, test for SB2 and its propriety. Number two, how many people participated in total in the Tuesday meeting?
There were 325 individual computer, phone, and on between Zoom and YouTube together. However, the number is likely higher than that due to spouses and people in the same household watching on one screen.
And you don't know whether that the participation was for the full duration of the meeting or just tuned in?
I do not know, and nor do I know how many people watched it following the meeting.
Right. And then the second question is, maybe Michelle, you know the answer to it. What's the average attendance at one of the school district meetings?
In my years as moderator, I think it's ranged between 250 and 650. It all depends on what kind of level of controversy there is on the articles that year. Last year was a big year with the proposed bond, for example.
Right, and in my very limited experience as a member of the school board, we had a very controversial budget and there were over 900 people there. So I should suspect that in this year, the 300 is a paltry number compared to the number of people who would like to participate in a normal year. I'm done with my comments, except Matthew, you have a very handsome little boy. That's cheating, however, but it's still a very handsome little boy. And now this old guy is going to tune off. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Rita.
Rita Blanchard, thanks for answering my hand. I'm at 111 Barton Corner Road. And I just would like to thank, what was his name? The two people for their opinions on SB2. The fact remains there are 221 towns in the state of New Hampshire. I'm sorry? Oh, and 108 of them have chosen to work under the SB2 law. And not one single town has ever rescinded it since it became a law in the 90s. So I just wanted to put that out there. I do respect others' opinions on what happens in other towns with SB2. Thanks.
Thank you. Ken.
Ken Wasson, Clark Lane. I just wanted to make a couple comments on, especially on the one that said that the delay between the deliberative session and the actual vote, if we were to go adopt SB2, would result in shenanigans. It's an interesting comment, and unfortunately it is unfounded and at best ridiculous. Because yes, there's always shenanigans in any vote. There would be shenanigans prior to a standard town meeting like we had. And I can honestly say that I have participated in New Hampshire town meetings since I was about the age of Matt's son, thanks to my dad. So, and he is very handsome. There you go. But the SB2 allows people to vote and to do research and go home and think about what they're going to vote on and not be told things and then have to raise their hand and go, yep, I guess I'm good with that. I'm not really sure what I heard, but I guess I'm good with that. So SB2 allows them to go to a deliberative session if they choose to, or do research on those things that are available to them, and then make an informed vote, and more people get to vote. So I just don't think that these things that are being put out, and as far as the participation at the deliberative sessions, as the other woman said, as you said, Mr. Moderator, it depends on the controversy of the vote. And if there's no controversy, nobody's going to show up. I agree. But if there's a controversy, the numbers will far exceed those or the previous non-controversial meeting. So I think we need to look at allowing more people to vote and to have a more informed vote when they do it by voting in SB2. Thank you.
Thank you. Becky Whitley.
Hi, this is Stephen Whitley from Turnberry Lane. And I wanted to speak in opposition to SB2. Wanted to make 2 points. First of all, yeah, there are a lot of communities that have done this and they have not voted to undo it. It's very difficult to undo it. Just like enacting it, it requires a 3/5 vote to undo it, which is a difficult burden to pass. And the other point that I wanted to make was that I actually come into contact via my job with a number of municipalities that have done SB2. And every single one of them regrets it because the participation at the deliberative session is so low. So I wanted to echo those comments that were made earlier, voicing concerns about what this would do to voter turnout and participation at the deliberative session for SB2. And the last thing I wanted to say is that there is a pretty significant gap between when the deliberative session is held under state law and when you actually go and vote. It's typically about 5 weeks, which is a long time. And so it's not like the situation that we're in right now, which is obviously a pretty extraordinary situation, where we're having sort of an SB2-like process where we're having this discussion via Zoom and then we're going to show up tomorrow to vote. It's far different. And so again, for those reasons, I would ask the voters to vote no on this article. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ken.
Sorry, forgot to lower.
Okay, sorry about that. Thanks. David DiPiano.
Hi all, Dave DiPiano, 68 Brookwood Lane. I'm another one of those people that came from a district that had SB2. And we've heard a couple times on the call here about participation. Participation might be lower. And I think as a town, we need to be careful. We define what participation means. In my mind, in the current system, if you, for whatever reason, can't miss the all-day meeting on a Saturday, you don't get to vote, period. Your participation is both to understand your neighbors and the other citizens in town, but you also can't cast your ballot to vote your will. If you miss a deliberative session under SB2, you still will have another opportunity to cast your ballot at your normal, Tuesday meeting that we normally have. And for some, that might be more convenient. Before work, after work, during lunchtime, you can go, you can drop your ballot off, you can complete it and go back about your business. When you also think about the deliberative sessions, in my experience, yes, you did see lower turnout to those sessions, but I recall hearing more participation from vocal minorities and majorities. So those who went to those deliberative sessions really were passionate about what they were trying to craft, whether it be the budget, if there were construction projects, whatever that might be. And for some, they may not want to participate in that creation. They just want to vote up or down on whatever the warrant article might be. And my last point is, I just want us to be careful when we say, people are going to be misinformed. There's a lot of different ways to become informed. You can talk to your neighbors, you can check town websites, you can read meeting minutes of all the different committees. So I really would like us to not tell people that you're going to be misinformed if you don't go to an all-day meeting, because there are plenty of ways to do it, and there's plenty of ways to participate if you so choose. And I think that's what's really before us with SB2. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, Mary Kirstein, Pennacook Road. I have a couple of questions. First off, if we were to adopt SB2, is there a guarantee that deliberative sessions could be held online similar to the way they're being held online this year?
I don't believe so. I am not familiar, and I will ask Jim to chime in if I'm wrong. I would believe that the format would be determined by the moderator or the statute, and I don't think either one would go that route, but I'm not sure if Jim has anything to add. It's a good question.
No, James, I think you answered it. I mean, the statute would probably not enable us to take questions and answers over online. Like we can broadcast like we do, over YouTube, so that the meeting can be recorded. But it's unlikely that we'd be able to do the questions and answered under the 91A.
So I'm sorry. So just to clarify, so what you're saying is that if we were to move forward with SB2, it is unlikely that we would be able to have the deliberative session in a way that we're having this meeting. Is that correct?
I do not foresee a meeting like this in the future, either with or without SB2. I do not foresee a meeting like this again.
Okay, so to that I say that, unfortunately adopting SB2 in many ways would be more prohibitive to involvement in the process for some people. I'm an essential worker. I wasn't able to participate in Tuesday's meeting because I can't take off 3 days or time off for 3 days in a week to fully participate in the process. So first there's that. The second would be, if we were to move forward with SB2, would the polls be open for in the future, if we were to adopt SB2, would the polls be open for the same prohibitively small window as they're going to be open for tomorrow? Or would they be open for an entire day as opposed to just a 4-hour window that's difficult to take off for some people, including myself?
Voting under SB2 occurs on the Tuesday election in March, which I believe typically runs 7 to 7 or 8 to 7. I'm not sure on the exact times, but yes, it would be a much larger window through the Tuesday election balloting period of time.
And I guess just to follow up then, out of curiosity, why is our window tomorrow so short?
It is 4 hours, which I believe is ample time on a Saturday morning and mirrors the typical period of time that we have our regular school meetings on Saturday.
I mean, I would respectfully disagree with that. Again, as someone who's an essential worker during this time, that is a very small window, but I appreciate the response. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And again, if you're not in favor of the rules as proposed, you can vote no on question 1. Let's see, we will go to owner. And before we hear that comment, I would just like to ask people, if they have already made their comment and do not have anything to add, to lower your hand as well as you're waiting in line, just so it's clear from our standpoint who's still waiting. Thank you. So owner.
Hi, Steve Adams, different owner. Still Kearsarge Avenue though. Listen to the discussion here regarding the SB2. I am not in favor of the SB2. In the past, I have served on a committee within the town here, and one of the things you always try to do is get information out to people. At the town meeting, it's get the entire conglomeration of folks who are interested in the various questions who come. But I can tell you, with just as being part of a committee, that you have a very small participation. And I think with SB2, with the deliberative session, you are also looking at that same type of small participation. So when you come to that second Tuesday in March to vote, I think that through the SB2, you are not going to be, or you're going to find that the populace is not as well informed as what it can become at the school board meeting, where the board can expand upon what these various articles mean and what the actual impact will be for the town. So I think it's critically important for this to stay, for the school district meetings to stay as they have been, to generate that participation, whether it be 200, 300, 500, 600, or 900 people, depending on the interest of coming out to do that. And whether it be that Saturday or meeting, or whether it be the Tuesday afternoon or Tuesday voting, people have to make some arrangements within their own lives, if they're interested in that participation, to be there. It's not everybody can be everywhere at the same time. We understand that, but if when I worked, if I had to and was interested enough to feel that I needed to be at a given meeting, then I would make arrangements within my life to be at that meeting, to learn the information, to be able to vote intelligently regarding the articles in question. So I think to move away into the SB2, and yes, some people have said yes, okay, and I agree. From everything I've heard, that participation is smaller at those deliberative sessions, and somebody indicated that, well, those people who were really activated by the issues, they can have a disproportionate.
I'm sorry, you're coming up at 3 minutes here, so I really need you to wrap it up.
Okay.
We have a lot of hands up.
Wrap it up. Forget about SB2. stick with the current situation. Thank you for what you've done in putting this together. But on the other hand, as you've already pointed out, this is not going to be the future under SB2 either. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you. Team Rollo.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I have spoken once before, so I don't know if there's other people that haven't spoken yet, but I'll be brief if you want me to go. But it's Mike Rollo, 1998. Hopkinton.
With so many hands, it's hard for me to keep track of just looking at names as opposed to, it's easier with faces in a room. So
fair enough. Yeah. I understand that. I just want to be really brief then, sir. It was mentioned by one of the very early speakers that no community has actually overturned and reversed their decision to go with SB2. That's a misstatement. That is not true. The town of Chester actually decided that in 2012 that they had seen the error of their ways and went back to their traditional meetings. So I just wanted to correct that, and I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Amanda Gilman.
Unmute now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. First, thank you all for taking the time to set this up, to everyone who had a hand in it. This is a major undertaking. My thoughts on Senate Bill 2, it provides a means for those who are feeling that the school budget is out of control to rely on the default budget, which is essentially last year's budget, and then to not attend the deliberative session, but rather just rely on this default budget, providing minimal nominal increases to the school budget each year. It's a way of controlling spending. I am not at all in favor of Senate Bill 2. Rather, I implore the superintendent and the oncoming board to listen to the will of the people, the will of your neighbors, and hear that the message that says they believe our budget is out of control. Do not pass it this year, but let's make changes for next. If a superintendent and board practice fiscal conservatism and gain the trust of the people, then Senate Bill 2 and the default budget with nominal increases aren't necessary, as the voters trust that their elected officials have everyone's best interests at heart. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Ron Noyes, please, Steve.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Ron Noyes, 849 Main Street. I guess I'll just start with, well, I'll have a follow-up question after I get through. This is the only thing I'm going to be speaking on tonight because I feel so strongly about it. And I want to start with what SB2 is not. It's not partisan. It's not divisive. And in fact, it's completely the opposite. There are people in town who don't come or cannot come to town meetings or school board meetings, whether that's single moms or dads, business owners, the elderly, or the disabled. They can't sit in a room for several hours. They literally cannot. SB2 would allow these people a voice when they weren't able to have one before. Without SB2, they will continue to be silenced. My question is, when it comes to people saying low participation, that's at the deliberative session. And I heard someone voice a concern about gathering information, and I just want to ask a question. Would the meetings be recorded, just like they are now, and put out on YouTube?
I believe that would be a matter for the school board to decide, but I would have every faith and confidence that the school board would record the deliberative sessions in that format.
I'm glad to hear that, and I think that that would essentially put those people, the elderly, disabled, business owners, you name it, would give them a chance to hear everything. And people are not stupid. They can hear what's heard. They can hear both sides. They have the opportunity to gather information on their own. And at the end of the day, without SB2, they will continue to be silenced. Thank you.
Thank you. Diane LaChance. You'll have to unmute yourself, Diane.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yep.
It's a little different tonight than it was Tuesday. Diane LaChance, Amesbury Road. I'm speaking in favor of SB2. I lived in an SB2 town, Windham, New Hampshire. If anybody knows about Windham, they have a pretty good school system, excellent school system, and they voted in SB2 prior to a huge undertaking to build their own high school, and they've built a beautiful high school, and they continue to get a lot of support for their schools. So I don't believe that's a reason to not vote for SB2 or consider it. My concern has always been the voters who cannot attend the meetings for the reasons that Ron Noyes pointed out. I won't repeat what he said, everybody heard it. But the other thing that has been brought up is the absentee ballots. There are many of our seniors who just cannot stand to stay here in the winter. They need to go south, and they know very well, you know, the town, and they know the issues in the town, and they talk to people, and they need to come back and want to be assured that they have a home to live in for the warmer months. And with the budgets increasing and they don't have the opportunity to register their vote, there's all kinds of information that the school needs to hear, and we need to hear from the town to make our community work. And one of the pieces of information I think that's sadly missing is the people who can't get to the meeting, who are having hardships, and we need to hear, you know, what they can afford rather than continuing to vote in budgets that move people out of town. That's my concern. It always has been, and I would ask people to consider voting for SB2 so that we have more people involved in the process. There's plenty of information available online, and giving people plenty of time, even after the deliberative session, especially the elderly, some time to go and listen to the meetings, listen and talk to their friends would be a plus. Thanks.
Thank you. Judy C. or Judith, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but.
Good evening. This is Judy Case, Briar Hill Road, and I'm speaking in support of SB2. You know, we all are living in very different times, and SB2 offers us many ways to be informed and stay informed. Just as the moderator has said, if you heard from a neighbor and got information, then you have been informed. Having an SB2 format means that you can speak to your neighbors, you can attend the sessions, you can look at the sessions online afterwards, just as many of us do for school board and other board meetings. and we are able to gain information and knowledge. What SB2 also offers us is to eliminate the panic, the sense of fear-mongering, or a false rush that says you must vote this time while you are sitting here in a particular room. It eliminates pressure for people when voting. There is no rush when it comes to making an intelligent and well-informed decision. SB2 offers all of us the chance to be well-informed and to go and digest the information and make an informed decision. Voting in private during election day ensures that people can escape the pressure, the fear-mongering that may ensue and often does ensue in town meetings when you may not side with your neighbor in the way that they feel or are impacted by the issues at hand. And again, when voting, more hours to drop your vote off and make your informed and non-rush decision is a benefit that SB2 offers all of us. And to speak to the fact of, again, of whether you're intelligent and have been informed, as in any voting campaign, there will always be and has been advanced planning and information sharing throughout the town in various mechanisms of phone calls, meeting face-to-face, albeit 6 feet apart, or Facebook pages. So I believe that SB2 will not decrease anyone's chance to be well informed and will increase everyone's chance to be able to take the time to place a ballot that is well informed and in the town's best interests. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Laura Morgan.
Yes, hello. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for your time and your hard work. My husband and I have lived here for over 33 years. And for 30 of those years, my husband couldn't vote because he was unable to attend the meetings when they were first on Wednesday evenings because he had to work, and then on Saturdays when he had to work. To say that he was uninformed is inappropriate. Just because someone doesn't go to a meeting doesn't mean they're uninformed. Believe me, he was informed. I have read every footnote to every financial statement for every meeting because I've attended every single one. If we had had SB2, my husband's vote would have been counted and he would not have been silenced. So I guess I just wish people would quit saying, if you don't go to the session, then you're uninformed. There are people who, because of their financial standing and their work, could not attend the meetings, but they wanted to vote. Once we have SB2, then everybody has the ability to vote. And just because they can't go to the meeting doesn't mean they're uninformed. Thank you.
Thank you. Hardenberg.
What did I say?
If you unmute yourself. Okay, Hardenberg is not unmuting themselves. So let's go to Sarah Matson-Dustin, please.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. So I am going to vote against SB2. And I think everyone who's already talked about SB2 probably has a pretty good handle on the process. But I want to clarify a couple of things for those who are listening in who perhaps don't and maybe have gotten the wrong impression from some of the comments in favor of SB2. The first thing that I want to clarify is that in order to vote on amendments in the SB2 process, you have to attend the deliberative session. You have to attend it in person. There's no absentee balloting process for the deliberative session in the SB2 process. So if you want to fully participate under SB2, you're still going to have to go to an in-person meeting. It still could last hours. The second thing that I want to say is that in the many town and school meetings that I have been to at this point, I cannot remember a single time when we took a vote on something that was controversial by anything other than a secret paper ballot. So please, for those of you who are listening, when we go back to our regular process next year, do not be under the impression that someone knows how you're voting on a controversial issue or is somehow able to pressure you or make you feel afraid. It's simply not true. Thanks.
Thank you. Rob and Catherine Mateo. Go ahead.
Yes, Catherine Matteo, 108 Park Ave. I would like to say my mother is 59 years old and she has been having to work Saturdays for 22 years. And I think if you're a property owner and you pay taxes in the town, you should have a say. And especially if you're the only person that's earning income in the household and you have to work. I understand that, you know, you might not be able to go to the deliberative session, but just like any other school committee meeting, they're all posted online afterwards. And, you know, we take the time to watch them and stay informed. And there's plenty of other neighbors in the town that, you know, have the same, you know, concerns that she or I would have. And being able to have an absentee ballot and expanded voting hours for people just make sure that this is accessible to everybody that should have a say. They live here. And, you know, it's making sure that everybody is included. And, you know, to say just because you weren't there in person that you're not informed and you shouldn't have a right to have a say and have a vote is just very discriminatory, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to ask people not to make repetitive statements. If what you're about to say has already been said, please think twice or just say you agree with somebody's comment and make it real short if that's the case. Ken has his hand up.
Ken Wasson, Clark Lane. I will make it short and sweet. Well, maybe not so sweet depending on what side of the board you're on, but anyways, it'll be short. A few facts about SB2. One of the things is that there's no requirement for absentee voting at the deliberative session because there is no voting at the deliberative session. The voting is open 7 to 7. There is absentee voting available. It is a 6-week waiting period between the deliberative session and the actual voting, which gives us time to print the minutes of the meeting and then either mail or hand distribute, if that may be the case, to everyone in the community so that everyone has an informed decision. And it is no longer those that can sit in the bleachers, which I don't know how many of you and most all of you that I'm looking at have the cushy seats, but the rest of us are sitting on those bleachers in the auditorium. And if I were, you know, I'm pushing 60 right now, but if I were a little older, I would not want to be sitting on those seats for 3, 4, 5, 6 hours during one of these meetings. I understand that that's an arduous thing for many people to do. The SB2 provides the opportunity for the deliberative session for those that can, print the minutes of the meeting, distribute it throughout the town, whether it's electronically or printed version, and then everybody in the town has knowledge of what's occurred at the deliberative session. Everybody gets a chance to vote, whether it be absentee or 7 to 7 on the day of voting. There is no discrimination against anybody. It is an absolute mandate that this is done for this town, so those people that cannot go to the meetings get to have a voice heard and do not lose their houses because of the ridiculous tax increases that are unsustainable in this town. Thank you for your time. Thank you for what you've done tonight.
Thank you. Laura Morgan. Laura, you'll have to unmute yourself if you have something to say. Okay, let's go to Patrick Miller.
Thank you very much, moderator, and I want to thank all the board members for their countless hours that they put in for the town. Thank you very much. Just briefly, I'd like to mention I've lived in town for over 30 years and have never, ever missed voting in any election with the exception of the school budget. I have never been able to vote because I cannot participate in that Saturday morning meeting. So I don't feel in the current position someone that is dedicated to being informed, dedicating to vote either in person or by absentee on every single ballot here in the town for 30 years should also have the right to vote on the school budget. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're getting close to the end point here. So I ask those with hands up to really think twice about really the value added for the meeting as a whole of your comments. I don't want to say no, but we are, I think, getting to the point of wrapping this article discussion up. With that, we will go to Janet Ward. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Okay. Thank you all. As everyone else has said, I really admire what you've done and I appreciate it.
Could you state your name and address, please?
Certainly. Janet Ward, 82 Watchtower Road.
Thank you.
My husband and I moved here in 1978. And like so many, we have attended school meetings and town meetings. And I remember Neil Cass explaining SB2 at a meeting at the library, and Rita Blanchard behind me was repeating what has been said tonight. Many people cannot vote because of their work schedule, etc. And I am totally sympathetic to that. The problem is that in human affairs, no system is perfect. But it seems to me, as someone pointed out, occasionally it seems to be the case that if you really have an intense interest in an issue, it may be possible to rearrange your personal schedule. But no matter what system is in place, somebody is going to find it difficult to attend a meeting. But town meeting has a long and distinguished history. And it is true that information about issues can be circulated before a meeting with SB2. But there's something that happens at the school meeting, at the town meeting, where citizens can talk to one another and address the need for information right there on the spot. And that to me has a value that is tremendous, especially this democratic way of approaching issues of great concern to all of us. So I will be voting against SB2 tomorrow. I very much respect the town meeting system, and so did Thomas Jefferson. He thought it was an embodiment of what democracy is all about. And as far as the Meadows not being informed, I just had a conversation a few hours ago with someone from the Meadows who knew all about this meeting. And so, Mr. Newsom, there's some evidence that information was circulated in that community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Again, I would just like to reiterate, please, if you have new, fresh comments on the issue, I want to hear all points, but if it's just repetitive from what we've already heard, please think twice about keeping your hand up. And also please lower your hand if you have already spoken and no longer wish to speak again, because it looks like we're okay. Let's go to Stephanie and Craig Green, please.
Hi, this is Stephanie Green. I'm on 346 Dolly Road. And my comment is, I keep hearing from the various speakers about how this is a democratic process and this has a long history, and isn't it great what a democratic process it is. And I only have one comment that I would like to say regarding that, is that it's not a democratic process when only people who can manage to take a day off of work can attend and therefore have the right to vote. This is very disenfranchising to those who have to work, who don't have the flexibility. In the past, you know, employers were much more willing to work with you to rearrange your schedule or to let you have a few hours off. And that's not the case anymore. We live in a different time. So that's all I have to say. I feel like SB2 would allow people that have been mentioned in the past who can't sit in the bleachers, I'm one of them, and who can't take time off of work or are single parents to actually have their voice heard and have a say in what happens in this town. But this idea that this process is more democratic when people can't attend a meeting and thus have no right to vote in this town is absolutely the opposite of that. So thank you very much. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Let's go with, I'm really getting torn here about the number of comments. I think we've heard much of what we'd have to say, and I'm very close to sort of calling the question, if you will, and moving forward, because we still have a lot to talk about, especially with the budget on Article 3. So I ask those with their hands up to please think twice about just how fresh and informative their comments are. As I'm really hesitant to call on many more at this point. So let's see. I think Don C. I can't remember if you've spoken on this one, but let's try. I need to be better at who's spoken already and who hasn't.
Yeah, it's me. One thing I just want everybody to realize is when you're standing in line and you have to put a vote in and there's a box that says yes and there's a box that says no, that is not private. End of comment.
I would say that we have one box with a tag that's yes or no, that's often folded in half, but it's not separate boxes for yes and no. Mary?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, Mary Kirstein, Pennacook Road. And again, I apologize, I was not able to participate in the first session. So just another clarifying question on the mechanics of this. So would the deliberative session, if we were to move forward with SB2, be held at the school? Or would it be held at the town hall?
I would foresee it happening at the school, but I'm not sure at this point, but I would foresee it happening at the school, most likely in the gym.
Okay, so if that were the case, would the school still provide free childcare for the deliberative sessions the way that they do for the school meeting now?
I'm not sure. I am not personally involved on that aspect of it. Can any of the other panelists, Andrea, go ahead.
I can actually speak to that. So the school does not provide the childcare. That's something that the PTA coordinates along with the Honor Society, that we try to do as an option so that folks with small children can come, but it would be based on the availability of volunteers, both adult and student.
Thank you.
Well, and the reason that I asked that is because, you know, a lot of people say things like, you know, work as being a barrier to attending the town meeting, but if the PTA were not organizing that, another barrier would be childcare. You know, if the PTA was not doing this free childcare at the meeting, it would be a real barrier for many parents to attend the meeting because they'd have to either hire a babysitter or they would have to, you know, only one parent could go. And so when thinking about the issue of accessibility, if we were to transition to SB2, that's something that I think people should think about as well, is you know, that the way that we're currently set up, it's frankly skewed towards parents with children because of the free childcare that's provided. And so when we're talking about and thinking about things like participation and ability to access the meeting and what makes it fair, frankly, it's already skewed one way. So, you know, as of right now, I still haven't made my decision, but it's something that I think people need to think about, is the execution of what it would look like if we were an SB2 town in terms of actual execution and not just in concept. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I saw Steve Chamberlain.
Let's go to it's listed as Patty McMillan.
Hi, this is Patty McMillan, 1584 Maple Street. I'm in favor of SB2 because my husband, Rick McMillan, who is usually the talker in the family, is out right now driving to his friends and neighbors' houses with ballots in hand to promote what is going on and to make sure that they come tomorrow to vote. If SB2 wasn't available, he wouldn't have that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd like to remind everyone that ballots will be available at voter check-in tomorrow as well. Let's try Patrick Miller.
I already spoke, moderator. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Stephanie and Craig Green. And I'm going to shut the line off now for please, no new hands coming up. If you haven't thought of it before now, I think we're really rehashing old material now. So please, even those with hands up, please think twice about continuing this discussion before we move on to Article 3, the budget, which I'm sure will have equal, if not greater, desire to comment. Thank you. Go ahead, Stephanie and or Craig.
I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Arnold. Go ahead.
James, I have a question, and then following that, I'm going to call the question. The question is, this petitioned article appears on both the school district ballot and the town warrant. If it passes on one, does that bind both sides of the town or not?
No, it does not. The votes are wholly independent of one another because the legislative bodies of school district meeting and of town meeting are two wholly distinct legislative bodies.
Okay, thank you. I now call the question.
Okay. We are all set. We are going to move on. That everyone had either lowered their hand or had already had a chance to speak. So we are going to move on to Article 3. Jim, I think this is where you probably have your statement to make.
Sure, and I will try to move through it pretty quick, but
please.
The reason I'd like to do it is because I think it will answer some of the questions that we've been asked and provide some additional information to the town and to voters on where we are. So bear with me one second. There we go. So what I'm hoping to do here pretty briefly is to provide some brief context over what's transpired in the district over the last 2 months since the moderator postponed our annual meeting, and then answer some of the questions that have come up, especially around cost savings that the district may have seen because of that, because of the distance learning, and then talk a little bit about what that means or could mean to our budget as we move forward. And so we know on March 13th, which I just realized it was Friday the 13th, the moderator postponed the meeting, which was scheduled for the next day, that Sunday, Governor Sununu issued his first emergency order, which directed remote learning across the state, which was effective March 6th. And the original order lasted through April 3rd. On the 19th of March, so pretty soon thereafter, the board had to transition to the school board. And this was our last in-person board meeting. And so at the beginning of this meeting, and on Tuesday, the former board presented the articles that would have appeared on March 14th. And then on the 19th, we swore in the new board, the 3 new board members. And one of the major first decisions this new board had to make had to do with what we do with district employees. It was unknown, the governor's executive order was through April 3rd. I think there was a lot of conversation that was going to be extended. But at that point in time, this is a couple months ago, it was unclear for how long this would last, how long we would be not having children attend school. So one of the first decisions the board made was we wanted to keep an intact workforce. We thought that was important for when school did reopen. And I think we felt that it was the right thing to do to ensure that we had the staff and support that students needed while remote learning, as well as when we would come back together. March 23rd marked the first day of remote learning in Hopkinton. Parents probably remember that day pretty well, when they became both caregivers as well as teachers to their children. And then on March 26th, the board here in Hopkinton, the school board, began meeting exclusively virtually over Zoom. And so I've gotten to know the smiles of my colleagues over Zoom. And then on the 27th, and so we're still in March, the governor issued his second emergency order having to do with remote learning that extended through May 4th. Again, for the district, this is a lot of uncertainty. There was a feeling that this would extend further, but the governor's emergency order brought us through May 4th. In April, the board had a lot of conversations around April vacation, and why that's important is because it brings us to when the end of school might be, and decisions around end of school and how that accrues to savings and how students learn. These are all important decisions that impact budgets and bottom lines. On the 16th, the governor again extended the remote learning through the end of the school year. And then we began discussions with the moderator, supervisors of the checklist and budget committee over 2 sessions around what should we do with annual meeting. A lot of those conversations had to do with statutory guidelines around contracts, issuing contracts for teachers, and how we move forward as a district. And we know that the moderator announced his decision on May 2nd for these meeting dates. And then on May 7th, the board met and set the last day of school. For seniors, it will be the end of this month on the 29th, and then on June 3rd for the rest of the school. And I bring all this up for several reasons. For context-wise, what has felt to many of us like we've been in this situation for years we've been in this situation for 2 months. And it is truly a crisis. And the savings that we'll see that I'll talk about in the next slide are savings accrued to the district over a short period of time, over 2 months. And it's not to say that those savings will accrue to the district as we move forward. These are savings that we saw as we moved into this crisis, and we've made adjustments to it. But as we think about what goes on next year, we're not sure how these apply moving forward. So as we move forward, we have a set of unknowns as we think about the budget and how we operate. One of the first ones is around our district building project. Last year, the town voted and passed a $9.7 million facility bond for the school that was debated. Many of us remember that. This next year's budget includes a half-a-year payment on a bond payment. That hasn't been bonded. We have a building committee chaired by Norm Goupel. That's made great progress. We are getting ready to go to the Municipal Bond Bank in July for a bond run. So the money that is included in the budget that we'll be voting on tomorrow includes an estimate for what that bond payment will be based upon a interest rate that came from the bond bank for planning purposes. Our hope is that that bond payment is reduced, that the interest rates are very low. And so when we go to bond in July, the planning numbers that we put into the budget, our hope is that those are lower and we have some savings in the budget from there. The second unknown is what's going to happen in the fall. Depending on which newspaper article you read and who you listen to, there's an assortment of opinions on what may happen in the fall, but no one knows. Will it be students in the classroom? Will it be a continuation of distance learning, or will it be a combination of those two? For planning purposes, those are all challenging. They all have different costs associated with them. So as a district, our job is to plan. Our job is to plan accordingly so that we have the resources we need to meet all the needs of the children who come to our schools, whether or not it's in distance learning, in person, or we have to make adjustments as we move through the course of the year. Another unknown is, are there going to be additional costs to the district associated with COVID-19? You can imagine that if students are going to be coming back in the fall, that there may be a need to supply masks for students and teachers. There's a conversation about additional computers and what our technology budget is, and are we able to handle, do we have enough computers to handle the need over time, and are those computers sophisticated enough, and then additional cleaning and sanitation. And a part of this is what costs, if any, will be supported by state and federal assistance. We don't know. We have received from the CARES Act notice that we will be receiving about $46,000 to support costs, but we haven't got, we don't have the details on what could be covered with those costs. We have some assumptions. But again, those are sort of unknowns of how we look forward to ensure the health and safety of all our students and our faculty and staff, which is, it's not just, keeping our hands washed, but it's the physical, emotional, and financial health and safety of our students, faculty, and community, and how we ensure those moving forward. So after Tuesday's meeting, and then looking at the comments that have come in, Steve and Michelle in the administration took a hard look at what are the savings that we've seen as a district attributable to the distance learning or the closing of the physical buildings. And so on this chart, you can see we've had significant savings from transportation. We've had some cost savings from salary and benefits. And those would come from not paying substitute teachers, bus monitors, crossing guards, referees, travel stipends, those type of salary and benefits. Utilities and some miscellaneous costs. So for the 2 months that I mentioned before, since distance learning began, the district's seen about a $240,000 savings from these activities. So I want to talk a little bit about what happens, budget-wise with savings accrued to the budget. So part of our budget is an undesignated fund balance. And so a fund balance in simple terms is what the district saves from the expense side of the budget. So as we've created, actually, let's stop for 1 second. So as we take into the savings from this year's budget, as we end the year, as we go into the end of our fiscal year in June, the school administration believes that we would end the current fiscal year budget with no less than $650,000 in undesignated fund balance. So that would be savings on the expense side of our budget. And those come from 3 areas. The first one is when we put the budget together, and the budget that was submitted to the budget committee and the budget that the budget committee passed that we'll be discussing in this article. there's a budget for $150,000 in the fund balance that we had put forward, and that is in the revenue line or in the revenue section of the budget. And I'll speak about that in a moment. And so the next line here is the $240,000, which is the savings I just discussed from distance learning specifically. And then accrued savings of $260,000 is budget management. It's, you know, it's how our administration has managed the budget. It's savings in a lot of areas of our budget, from contracts to you know, positions that have gone unfilled for some time. So, you know, over time, wise budget management, you save some dollars and we have an accrued savings. And so when we put the budget together, we had $150,000 in fund balance in the revenue line for next year. As we move to the end of the fiscal year, we're seeing that number go up to $650,000. And so as we close out the fiscal year in June, the board will have some decisions to make around the use of this undesignated fund balance. And so what I'm putting here is, it says potential utilization, because the board hasn't voted on this. The board hasn't discussed this as a board. But I want to put some of these out again, so we all, as we get into the larger debate on Article 3, we have some additional context to pull from. So one use of potential utilization of the fund balance is to put additional dollars into the Article 10 Tax Stabilization Fund. So this is a fund that the board can put money into over time, and by state statute, there is a limit to the amount of money that the board can put into this fund. And this fund is really what the title is, tax stabilization. Dollars can come out of this fund at the vote of the board around tax rate setting time in order to lower the tax rate for the town, in an effort to stabilize the tax rate, to try to even out some of the peaks and valleys of the tax rate. So I think currently, and I'm looking at Steve Chamberlain, who can nod or shake his head if I'm wrong, I believe we have about $156,000 in the current tax stabilization fund. In the current budget, we had used $175,000 for tax rate stabilization. We have not put any dollars into the budget we'll be discussing in Article 3. But if we increase, there's room for us to increase by $220,000. That would max out the amount of money that the board could put into a tax rate stabilization, which I think is very prudent. It's a very practical approach. So over time, we can draw from that to stabilize the tax rate. The second potential utilization for the fund balance, the $650,000 I just discussed, is a reduction of the tax rate, which I'll explain exactly how that works in 1 minute. But that would be pretty much using the $390,000, which for this calculation would be the $150,000 that we've already budgeted, that's currently in the budget as revenue, and then adding in the savings from distance learning brings us to $390,000. And what that does, it provides additional revenue. It goes into the revenue part of our budget, which would then decrease the amount to be raised from taxes, thus lowering the tax rate. And then, you know, back to the slide around some of the unknowns. You know, we don't know what the ramifications for the district to continue distance learning in COVID-19. And so there has been some discussion if we want to set aside and obligate some of the surplus or fund balance money to ensure that we have funds available for unforeseen circumstances or things that we might want to get set up for a fall that could be similar to what we're experiencing now. And so I just wanted to spend a minute because this is confusing, especially as I'm talking about expenditures and revenue, just to quickly show how what additional revenue means and how that lowers the tax rate and how fund balance applies to that. So when we calculate the tax rate, you know, the first item that goes into this is the approved expenditures. And so that's what we're doing here today. You know, we're going to vote on a budget the budget that's approved by the voters, that bottom line number, the board cannot expend more than has been approved by voters. So if the voters approve a $22 million budget, just putting that number out there, if that's what the voters approve, the school board cannot spend more than that dollar amount. That is the limit of our ability to expend. So when we calculate the tax rate, you start with the approved expenditures, and then you minus the revenue that you would receive or we have, and that equals the amount to be raised by taxes. And so the revenue that comes in, be it in fund balance or be it in grants, that revenue is subtracted by your expenditures, and then you get your amount to be raised by taxes. This is a little bit different than how we budget our households and how a business sees revenue. When I receive more revenue here, I might spend more money or spend that revenue. In school district budgeting and municipal budgeting, the revenue is used to offset the amount that we raise by taxes. And so that's a very important concept, and it takes a while it's taken a while for me to wrap my head around this. That the more revenue you have doesn't mean you can spend more money. What it means is the revenue helps decrease the amount that we have to raise in taxes. And then to kind of complete the calculating the tax rate, you take your amount that raised by taxes, you divide it by the town valuation, you get the tax rate, and that tax rate is applied to individual properties. And so what I want to leave, and the reason I'm bringing this back up, that the additional revenue does not equate to more money to spend, is it's important because if we have the $650,000 in the fund balance, which is this next line, that doesn't mean we can move that and then spend $650,000 or the $390 that we put to reduce the tax rate. That's not new money that we can spend. That's new revenue that offsets the total expenditures in order to decrease taxes. And so again, this is just an example to sort of show you what I mean sort of in a real world example. And so our current fund balance right now in the budget that's before us that has been approved by the budget committee, the fund balance is $150,000. If we revise that number to the 390, and so that's the 150 plus the savings from the distance learning, you would see a tax savings of about 31 cents per thousand. And so the Article 3 tax impact from that budget that was recommended by the school board and the budget committee would go from a 75 cents per thousand to a 44 cents per thousand if that $390,000 was applied from the fund balance. And so I want to go back and leave you with, these decisions haven't been made. That the board hasn't made these votes, that as we move closer to the end of the fiscal year, that's when we have a firmer understanding of how much is in that fund balance. And then the board makes decisions about how to apply those dollars. But I think it's a safe bet that, and I think the board can surely chime in when I'm done in a moment here about their thoughts. I do think the putting dollars into the Article 10 makes sense given the times that we're in to ensure that's funded adequately. And then it feels pretty prudent that these dollars which have been saved from the district should be returned to the taxpayers, because that's what prudent fiscal management is if you have savings, those savings should accrue to the benefit of those paying the bills, and those are the taxpayers. And so with that, I guess if it's okay with you, Mr. Moderator, if any member of the board wishes maybe to add any thoughts to this presentation, if you would welcome that, I would appreciate it.
That seems prudent to me.
Great. Jim, I just wanted to add to that great presentation. We've had a lot of conversations for the past few days and weeks about these savings. Well, not weeks for the savings. That really has been in the past couple of days. But one thing that has really been very clear that not only have I experienced in my own house, but we've heard from several, I mean, really everyone in our community, is how hard COVID-19 has hit us all. Whether we're experiencing a loss of work or balancing a change in what our work life looks like, along with distance learning for our children, whether we're watching our 401ks crash or worrying about our upcoming tax bills, that was all taken into account with what we were going to hopefully do with our fund balance. And I really think that this is a way for us to provide that relief to our community, while also being able to provide the support that our students need. Hopefully we will return in the fall, but we might not. Either way, it's going to look different. And this is something that we have all, including our children, have experienced. And so this, I think, is a really good and balanced way to provide that relief that we've heard and I've experienced in my own life, a loss of work. So I understand that. And I do want to make it clear that this relief would not come in your July statement. It would come in December. The July tax bill was something that was decided a year ago. But we would be able to provide that relief while also having the budget as proposed by both the budget committee and the school board. So I just wanted to make those 2 points.
I'd like to say, I thank you very much, Steve and Michelle, for that information and present it to the town for this meeting. And Jim, thank you very much for doing the presentation. I'd like to support, Andrea's comment about that. This is something that the board can look at if the budget is approved from the town based on what the budget committee and the previous board has adopted. It provides relief to this community, and that's something that we definitely hear and is definitely necessary. We don't know how our students are going to be when they return, emotionally, academically. We don't know what's going to be the case when they return. There's a lot of unknown variables that we have to look at, but we understand that it's important that we provide some relief to this town and understand that we are listening to you. We understand, and that this is part of our job as elected officials to provide you guys with a plan, with an opportunity to understand where we're going with. Thank you.
Jim.
Go ahead, Seth.
So I agree with the proposal that you put forward. And I want to say that it strikes me that giving immediate relief now is important. And it's also important to put money into the tax stabilization fund for future years. Because as I've started to be on the school board, I've started to think about what decisions have we made as a town. We've made some laudable decisions. And the fundamental one is to go it alone as a K through 12 school system in a small town without a lot of business. And so we have taken the responsibility to put forward a good and productive school system each and every year. And what I've learned about budgeting is when 85% of your costs are employees and related expenses, there is not a lot of wiggle room. And what I've learned is that there's not as much to cut as I may have believed. And so we need to take steps to be responsible, to understand the tax burden, and maybe in the long term make other long-term decisions. But in the near term, we have to give relief now, but we also have to be able to come up with a plan so we can have a sustainable, responsible budget next year and still provide relief. So this plan gives relief now, but also, as I understand it, puts money aside to give some relief next year so that we can again be responsible, putting forward, keeping that responsibility that we've committed to a strong school system while respecting our taxpayers and their needs.
Thank you. This is where the summary process and the proposed rules became difficult. Most of the comments were positive towards the school board budget, but that's only because
it's 9 o'clock.
The budget often included amendment requests. Many comments included with the amendment requests focused on the fact that the times are difficult and different now due to the pandemic that they were when the budget was formulated, that families are struggling and uncertainty abounds. These comments requested caution, prudence, and taking a conservative approach. They also asked for creativity and resourcefulness instead of increasing tax dollars. Taxpayers have to make do with increasing unemployment, stagnating wages, decreasing benefits, and schools need to take this into consideration as well. Others stated that they believe the tax raises are not sustainable and will force people to move out of town. Comments made in favor of the budget pointed out that budget cuts will result in a loss of quality resulting from reduction of services, staff, especially in the 6th grade, and enrichment programming, increasing class sizes, and the inappropriateness of replacing long-serving teachers with cheaper new ones. They also said they believed the proposal is fair and balances the needs of the schools with the interests of the taxpayers following cuts made through the budget development process. Others stated that our schools achieve top results with average per pupil spending. Several questions were received. The first one wanted to ask the board to quantify the savings from distance learning, which I believe Jim just laid out for us. Another request to reduce the budget included a statement that there is a need to use stabilization and adequacy aid to reduce the overall budget and not use it to defray operational costs in the budget. And I think that was also covered by Jim's presentation as well. Other questions. Please explain why a legal mandate of specialized transportation for $82,000 is not a separate line item, and why is the specialized transportation expense not being shared by the towns that these children reside in? Jim?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm wondering if this is a good question for Steve or Michelle. Or Steve, maybe you can start.
Sure. First of all, the costs are only associated with students who live in this town. And this is students, this specialized transportation is required for students who through the IEP team process has been determined that the environment, they must find a specialized or a different school environment. So this is transportation to a school in a different place because it's not possible for us to educate them in town, but this is only for Hopkinton students. And it is this is an increase to a separate line item.
Thank you. One of the areas of growth improvement needed that was identified that this writer agreed with was social and emotional learning. Relatedly, they would add that in a conscious effort to improve school climate and culture for all students, how specifically is the district addressing the need to better address social emotional learning in Hopkinton, and what is the plan to improve?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Steve, you've done so much work on this. I'm wondering if you would address that question.
Sure, happy to. Currently, our social emotional support for students in distance learning comes with an awful lot of collaboration, an awful lot of connection, providing opportunities for teachers and families to report concerns. Our child studies, our student support teams, they all are continuing to meet. Going forward, and I very much appreciate the Hopkinton Education Association, HEA's enthusiasm during the negotiation process, led by Liz and Matt, to take a look at how we can instill a social emotional program at the secondary level. There is some enthusiasm in the contract to get a steering committee together and develop a system, a more systemic approach to social emotional learning at the secondary level. Currently, we have an advisory and we have great connections and great care between our teachers and students. But our hope is to provide some more systemic approach, not unlike we're doing at the elementary school with responsive classroom. There's talk about moving responsive classroom into the middle school and also providing some time and some implementation of evidence-based program regarding social emotional support, but working with teachers and administration and kids together to develop a program that's right for us. So what came out of the negotiations was energy and enthusiasm to put a steering committee together once we do get back to traditional school to design a program that fits for HOP involving teachers, students, and administration.
Thank you. Next, there are a couple questions about the elevator, ranging from wasn't it on the articles last year and why are we hearing about it again? What's the current status? Is it functioning? What's the workaround? What is the repair status? And what are the ramifications of not approving spending for that?
So maybe I'll take a start at this, and then Steve, you can help fill in the blanks. So what was the first part of the question? So the elevator that was part of the facility project that was voted on last year was a elevator at Harold Martin School. And so this is the elevator at the middle high school. And so it came to the attention of the administration and the board in February timeframe that the lift had some problems that needed to be addressed. So it was looked into, and it's an older elevator. It has specific parts it needs, and so the cost, I think the estimated cost is about $93,000 for the repair. It needs to be done. We have students that need this elevator in order to attend classes, to be a full participant in the school district. So this is something we have to repair. We have several choices, I think, as a board for how we can pay for these repairs. We could use some of the fund balance that I just went through and spoke about in order to address the problem within the expenditure line of this year's budget. $650,000, we have the room in which to do that. We also have a building repair and maintenance fund. That's an article that we'll be voting on tomorrow. I think this year it's to add an additional $140,000. And that fund is like our capital improvement fund. We have a list of repairs and maintenance projects that are prioritized, and that we're putting money into that account every year to go through the prioritized list to spread out some of the costs. And so if we want to fund this $90,000 through the building repair and maintenance fund, we would then just have to reprioritize that list in order to make room for that project, which is a project that needs to happen soon. It's not one that we can put off. So that would be a prioritization, I think, from Steve and the administration, and then that would be approved by the board. And then the third option would be to use, because this wasn't part of the facility project and part of what we put forward in the bond, as that project gets finalized, and if there's any room within the bond, this could be an additional item to include in there. That would be a sort of a third option for the board to consider. None of those, aside from the vote on the building repair and maintenance trust, that's not a vote specific to this item, but I think from the board's discretion, that could be a fund in which the board chooses to pay for the elevator repair. Steve, is there anything I missed in that answer that you want to elaborate on?
Can I make a quick comment on this? Just briefly, I just want to say one thing, just to be clear, this was not in the proposed 2021 budget. When we went to the budget committee about this line item was not in there. So we're trying to adjust in terms of how we're going to pay for it. I just want to be clear on that.
Great, thank you. Another question was, please include the numerical value associated with assistant coaches, media library specialists, and other positions that may be cut if we do not pass the school board budget.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Steve, do you have those numbers? Is that something you can provide?
Sure. The assistant coaches was a $20,000 reduction. Our library media specialist assistant was a $31,000 reduction, and the sixth grade teacher was a $70,000 reduction. Those were the major components. This is part of the tiers that has been publicized.
Jim, can I make one comment there? Again, the proposed budget going forward already has these positions reduced. We're not, the current, but accepting the current budget as proposed already has those positions reduced, just to be clear.
Thank you for that clarification. Another question that came in, long-term plan. it occurs to me that in subsequent years, residents have requested a longer view of the costs of providing a quality education to our students. I know this voter has spoken in publicly about this last year's meeting and realizes that projections are challenging and things come up, contingency line items, for example. But even the state requires a 2-year budget process. They think it is disingenuous and approaches on being disrespectful of community members to not be given the opportunity to see the 2-year projections on anticipated expenses. Please respond.
Yeah, I'll start and then others can chime in. I mean, so we budget, so the budget that's approved by voters is an annual budget. So I think that's our job, is to come forward to this meeting every year with the budget. The board works with the budget committee who has projections. And so the budget committee has made assumptions based upon our current spending, some additional assumptions, and so they have drawn out, and it's longer than 2 years, and Billy might remember their time frame. But anyway, so there are longer term projections, and as Billy and Steve have said, 85% of our budget is people, and so we know what we can extrapolate many of those costs year to year. They're not exact. Health insurance and benefits is a big driver in our budgets, and those numbers increase probably on an annual basis more than I think many of us would care to believe that they would on an annual basis. So I think I'm sort of meandering here, but I think we do have a pretty good sense of what our fixed costs are year to year, and I think we'd be happy to work with whoever asks what those fixed costs are. It's not required of us to build multi-year budgets. That's not how our annual budgeting process works. But I do believe through our work with the budget committee and then internally, we have a pretty good grasp on what a short-term and medium-term outlook is for the district.
Can I chime in on something, Mr. Moderator? One thing that's important to know is that this board's only worked together for 2 months. And one thing that we have developed is moving forward a finance committee with this board, Rob and myself, and we also have developed a CIP committee. So we are looking at revamping the budget process here and trying to find a better way in order to deliver this budget to this town. So we haven't had a chance to meet yet, but it's important for this town to know that this board has agreed on making new committees in order to deliver a new message to this town, that we understand you guys want to see something moving forward that's clear. And we look forward to start working on that.
Thank you. Has the school board or administration considered how community member volunteers can be part of a cost savings solution?
So I would say, specific to the question, I think probably the answer is no. We haven't sat down and had a strategic conversation about how volunteers can reduce costs. That said, our district has many volunteers who spend their time working with students, assisting coaches. So we have a high degree of volunteerism both in the school district and in our community. And so we support that. We want to see more volunteers. But to answer the specific question, at least I haven't been part of a specific conversation around, how to reduce costs through the use of volunteers. I think that's a strategy probably worth investigating. I'm not sure how much of a cost savings we'll find across the board, but I do think, working with Steve and his team, if there are areas where volunteers can be of assistance to the functioning of the school district, I think we want to embrace them.
Thank you very much. With that, I would like to open it up to participants on the call for comments and questions. So remember to please click the raise your hand button to open it up, and we will start with Mary.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Mary Kirstein on Pennacook Road. So I just want to clarify, because the board spent a lot of time talking about the potential tax relief that could come to people in the, what was it, $390,000. And there was a slide that Jim showed, Mr. O'Brien showed, that showed a difference of 44 cents versus 75 cents. So just to clarify, if the budget as proposed would go through, and if that extra money were then to be used for that tax relief, next year, no matter what, we would have an automatic 30-cent increase in our tax rate if between this year and next year the school budget did not change. There would be an automatic 30-cent increase if the budget as proposed this year went through and if that extra money was used for tax relief. I just want to clarify that. Is that correct?
Sure. So I'll speak to it. So I wouldn't use the word automatic, but I do think you're bringing up a point that again want to talk through. So because fund balance is used as revenue, and if we go back to that slide that shows how the tax rate is set, which is appropriations minus revenue equals the amount to raise in taxes. If you have less revenue year over year, then the amount that you're going to have to raise through taxes is going to increase. And so that is why we have the tax rate stabilization fund, which is sort of that longer term play in which the board has the ability at tax rate setting time to use those funds in order to shave off those peaks that may accrue. So I would not use the word automatic. I think that this is a management that the board does have to, I shouldn't say would have to, we do have to manage. And so part of providing additional fund balance to provide tax relief this year would be to use our budget management overall to keep our costs low. And then the hope at the end of the year through sound fiscal management, we have additional fund balance to be able to apply. And then having additional money in the Article 10 funds helps us to manage the tax rate impact. I hope that answers the question. I don't want to say it's automatic because there's a lot of tools that we have in the toolbox in order to manage that. And with this size of the surplus and being able to put it into the Article 10 funds, that does help on the management side of the tax rate.
Again, I apologize. I'm really just trying to make sure I understand this. I hear what you said. I think I understand it. And so what you're saying is still that if it goes through, if we have that relief, if absolutely nothing else changed between this year and next year, if there was no increase in revenue, if, God forbid, there was no increase in the proposed school budget, if there was nothing at all that changed from this year to next year, we would have an extra 30 cents per thousand to pay no matter what. Again, I understand what you're saying with, we have all these tools, we can increase our revenue this way and we can do this and that. If that didn't happen, if our revenue did not increase, if we didn't have anything extra, if the school proposed budget did not change at all from this year to next year, there would still be an additional 30 cents per thousand that we would have to pay. I want to make sure I really understand this, please.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how I can explain it any clearer, that we have the amount to expend minus revenue. And so to get to the cost. And so what I know is that from year to year, things are never the same. And so we can have a lot of ifs. And I could just say that if we use that money this year to provide relief, tax relief, then if that money is not available next year, we will have to find other tools in order to accommodate all things being equal. So So I don't know, again, it's hard to answer that question. It's just a lot of ifs. Like what I can say is if we are able to apply the fund balance to next year's budget, we can have a reduction of whatever 30 some odd cents. How we look forward in the future, there's a lot of scenarios. And so it's hard to answer that question, Mary, I apologize.
I understand. I understand. And I appreciate that you have said that it's difficult to wrap your mind around it if you're not, really in the throw of things. And again, it is difficult to wrap your mind around it, which is why I'm just trying to seek clarification. It just seems like there's a lot of talk of magnanimous and we're providing this relief, we're listening to people, but based on what I'm hearing, based on what I as a layperson am understanding, it's kind of like fake relief. Like you're saying we're going to give you this extra 30 cents, but next year you're going to have to pay for it unless we are able to figure something out. If we're not able to figure something out, then yeah, you're going to have to pay for it. But
Mary, please wrap it up, Mary. You've excluding Jim's time, you've been speaking for more than 3 on this question. So please wrap it up quickly for us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ken.
That was great. You
Took a while for the unmute button to come up. Sorry.
That's okay. Just state your name and address for the record, please.
Absolutely. Ken Wasson, Clark Lane. So I hear all this stuff and I got it and I understand the expenditures versus minus revenue doesn't allow us to spend any more money. I got all the fancy slides. I got all the PowerPoints. I'm good with that. When the dollars come in, I don't care what business you're in, whether it's a school or a business or a home. Dollars come in and you got dollars to spend. When the dollars decrease coming in, as so many of us have during COVID-19, had COVID-19 or any other apocalyptic event, as I call this, because I don't like the word pandemic. But in any case, your proposals are still increases. They should be decreases. And that's the part that drives me crazy. I don't care. And sorry, I misspoke. I do care that if you have to let people go, I get it. I understand. It's hard. 7,000 of my friends are leaving because my company is letting go half my workforce. It is a fact of life in today's environment. You do not need to increase my taxes in any way, shape, or form. You should decrease them such that it is capable of people. And I speak for myself. I'm okay. I'll make it regardless of what you do. But there's a whole lot of people in this town that are not going to make it because you choose to increase taxes and keep increasing them and keep doing it. It's been a 21% increase in 4 years. That's ridiculous. Your education level has not increased 21% in 4 years. You can't increase your education level 21%. Otherwise, you were truly doing nothing in 2016. And maybe that's the case. And maybe we should go back and look at what that was in 2016. But currently, that is an unacceptable, an unsustainable increase. And you need to realize that the people of this town will no longer tolerate your proliferation of spending. It is ridiculous. It's got to stop, and it's got to be a decrease, and it may take that some people take pay cuts.
You're approaching 3 minutes here, so please wrap it up.
Absolutely. And it may include some people taking pay cuts, and those people taking pay cuts may include the very top leadership of our school. Thank you. That's my time.
Let's go to Peter. Peter, you can unmute yourself. Thank you.
Now, I'm okay.
Please state your name and address again.
Peter Unich, 931 Gould Hill Road.
Thank you.
I keep hearing about an 85% fixed expenditure of the school budget, leaving 15% in what I would typically call discretionary. Well, that's $3 million. You know, Everett Dirksen, $1 million here, $1 million there. All of a sudden, it adds up to real money. Have you been in contact with any of the organizations? Bill and Melinda Gates have a specific organization that they're looking at leveraging the experience of distance learning to enhance computer-aided instruction, you know, in the classroom that doesn't depend on the parents who, you know, are the one factor that's not sustainable in your distance learning scenario. I mean, we have a young lady who works for us who's taking care of 4 children. She used to work for us, you know, almost half time. So that's a big issue. I think the community volunteer is very important. I was just asked to go back to work as a professor at a university. I told the president that I wouldn't do it. I thought his university would be better suited to be sold as a nursing home, but that's my strong opinion. The difficulty that I'm having is that you guys, and I admire your work, but you're not to be trusted. Steve, you remember very specifically when I was still on the school board and you were just made, you know, just raised to your current position. There was a big effort called Hopkinton 2.0. It was going to reshape the future of the Hopkinton education experience. Nothing came of it. No, I mean, we got together, we couldn't even agree on hiring a consultant to help us bring the expertise. I believe, as the last speaker, Ken, it is time for you to put a cap on it and get smart. Figure out how to do things. If that means that, yes, Bill, you know, I love your smile, but get smart.
Please,
now,
Peter, please stop with the personal attacks.
I wasn't a personal attack. I was looking at Bill's very nice smile.
It sounded to me like a personal attack. I'm sorry.
Bill, were you smiling or not? Yes. So no personal attacks, but it's time for you to do what you can do with the money you have. Plenty of people can help you. Plenty of people have experience, not me, but plenty of people have the experience and time to set it right, cut the budget, and goodbye and good night.
Thank you. Emily.
Yes, hello, this is Tom Burek of 1526 South Road. I have a few questions for the chairman, Mr. O'Brien. Jim, you spoke of the $650,000 in total savings, and you said this is for 2 months. And I have several questions. First of all, is that for the months of April and May, or March and April? And if it does not include the month of May, and I'm assuming it does not, do you have any projections, or could you provide some projections tonight for how much more you think you might save in the month of May? And would it also be correct to assume that if there are additional savings in May or between May and the end of June, that those could also be used to reduce the overall tax rate?
Thanks, Tom. So the first point is the $650,000 isn't the accrued from savings from distance learning. The accrued savings from distance learning was $241,000, and that's added on to the $150 that we had already budgeted at the beginning of the budget cycle, and then some additional savings that we've seen over the course of the year. So that equals the $650. Again, just to clarify.
Understood. Thank you.
You're welcome. And then, so
do you anticipate more savings from the distance learning between now and the end of the year?
So I'm going to look at Michelle Clark because I believe that the 241 takes into account known savings that we know of. So things like positions at like crossing guards. We're not anticipating the crossing guard to come back in the month of May or June, and so that's been accounted into that $241,000. So there may be some additional savings. Just like as we move forward, there may be some additional savings and some contracts that we might have. So that 650, I would say, is probably the floor. To what extent we're going to see a whole lot more is probably doubtful. But there could be some additional savings that trickle in. I would hazard a guess that we've probably seen what we're going to see through the distance learning. There may be some more, but probably not significantly more. As we've been in this situation now for several months, and we can sort of plan for June 30th, knowing how we're going to end up the school year. But to your larger point, Tom, I do think if there are additional savings between now and June 30th, when the fiscal year closes, I would anticipate that the board would have a conversation about what we do with those savings and returning it to, and how much of that do we turn to the taxpayers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to David Feller, please. Go ahead.
Thank you, James, for your diligence to this process as well, and also to the administration and the board members for all your service to the town.
I'm sorry, could you state your name and address for the record, please?
David Feller, Clement Hill Road. I apologize.
Thank you.
Jim, I'd like to thank you also for that presentation of expenses versus revenue. I thought it was very clear. I'd also implore all of the people calling in to be respectful of our people that are volunteering here, their time and effort as they're trying to do the best job that they can, whether we agree with them or not. James, my question is relative to the various amendments, not one in particular, but all of them. And I hope it's appropriate. But since there are a limited number of people that have amended a few of these articles, and it's very easy within one household or whatever to control that through the process, I'm wondering if any of these amendments are heavily concentrated or 100% concentrated by one family or one household.
Well, certainly that is possible, but that the same is true and possible at our regular formatted meetings where, for example, you could make a motion and your spouse could second it, where you only need one person. In this case, each of the options had multiple numbers in the ballpark, except for the one option that is between last year's budget and this year's budget. But otherwise, I would say that we kind of had a period to discuss that at an earlier stage, talking about the ballot. And this is more just on the budget, as opposed to sort of the way it was formatted. But I appreciate the question. I hope I answered it.
Okay, yeah.
And the other thing I would say is that all of the requests for amendment and comments that I received offline between the two online sessions are available on the school district website for your review, so you can determine that for yourself. And all of those comments will be and are part of the minutes and the record for the meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks. Dibble Home. You can unmute yourself. Any comment from Dibble Home if you unmute yourself? We'll try to come back to you, but let's move on to Arnold after he states his name and address again for the record, please.
Am I coming through?
Yes.
Okay, Arnold Coda, 400 Gould Hill Road
Thank you.
in Hopkinton. A little bit of historical information, going back to one of the comments that Seth Frame made. He said that we had become what we are now, a single district SAU, and that we have improved significantly our education. I had been talking with Seth maybe a week and a half or 2 weeks ago, and I mentioned to him that that had been done when I had been on the school board back in the early 1992, 93. And he had not known that until I had mentioned that to him. In any event, the historical information is that prior to becoming the single SAU we are now, we had been part of a 4-district SAU. It was not working out well, and probably hadn't been working out well for several years, but be that as it may, when then I was on the board, we got into talking about how could we become better educationally and fiscally. So we decided that, well, what if we were to go it alone? It was not an easy decision. There was one superintendent, one business administrator who served all of the schools that were in that 4-district SAU. That meant, of course, that all of the superintendent and superintendent's office expenses, business administrators' expenses were shared by the 4 districts. The downside was that the superintendent could not really give adequate attention probably to any one of the 4 districts, and certainly not to Hopkinton. We were already K through 12, so we made the decision to go on our own. We really believed that we would save a lot of money. We believed also that we would become a better educational facility, let me put it that way. I can't judge whether or not we've become better educationally, but we have become a financial disaster insofar as being a single SAU. And I know of at least one other person who was on the board at that time who feels the same way. So in any event, here we are now dealing with this budget. And as I had written in a letter that was published in today's Monitor, over the last 6 years, the net budget, net being after revenue, has increased just a shade over 21%. How many people's salaries have increased that much? Leave aside doctors and lawyers, because perhaps their salaries have. But be that as it may, we cannot continue doing this.
Arnold, you've reached 3 minutes, so please wrap it up.
Okay, I will. As of today, there are $584,254.75 in past due taxes going back to July 1, 2010 and coming through right today. If you people really want to give taxpayers relief, do something so that these people can pay off their back taxes. They are being assessed a 12% interest rate on these taxes. Do you really believe that they have chosen on purpose to not pay their taxes, given that they have to pay a 12% interest rate on them? I really think that that answer is no. You folks really need to work hard, harder than you have. I have no problem with flatlining the budget because I think that's what needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Esperuti.
Hi, my name is Sarah Brody, 371 Maple Street. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate all the hard work of the members on the board last year and this year. I do think that the budget is very fiscally responsible. I know that there have been very, very hard decisions that have been made, particularly around the impacts of the students' education, seeing that the 6th grade class next year with the proposed budget will only have a half year science, a half year social studies, and will not have the opportunity to take an advanced math course. So we're talking about a budget that was very well thought out and very much thought about what students' needs were. And I appreciate that that was a hard decision and that you put the time and effort in, knowing that you were also thinking about the community members and the tax burden on the community members at this time. So I appreciate the compromises that you put together in your proposed budget. The question that I had was, if someone could explain to me that on the ballot, why Article 3, the proposed budget by the committee, is last versus first.
Because the process in a regular meeting would be that the motions to amend come first, and it's only after those fail that the question is called on the proposed article itself, which is why that comes last in the process.
So even if 90% of people agree to it, but 50% agree to Article 3, Motion 1, it won't pass.
As I stated earlier to that very question, once the first motion passes, the other ones will not be counted. Therefore, we won't know if 90% approved that budget. It's quite possible that people are in favor of a cut, yet would still vote for the budget in an effort to pass a budget, so we don't have to come back and try again, because without a default budget in our format, we do need to pass a budget. So they very easily could want a cut, but still vote for the proposed in an effort to get something passed.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Bill Hill.
Thank you. Bill Hill, 169 Old Haneker Road in Hopkinton. I had some questions about the elevator, and they really weren't answered. Is it working now? And if not, what are we doing as far as a workaround? Obviously not right now, but prior to the close down of the school.
So it was very erratic. The service was coming regularly. So yes, it is functioning, but it's not stable. It is not dependable. It's erratic, and we need that service to be very stable. But yes, it is working today.
Okay, and did we get several bids on the repair? $92K sounds like a lot of money for an elevator repair.
Right. So that is our first estimate. And so it is a Stanley elevator with only Stanley proprietary parts. So the parts are very old and can only be obtained through Stanley, but we would put out a bid for the installation labor, but the parts are very specific to that product and to that elevator. But once we did decide to execute or implement that fix, we could bid out some of the installation, but probably not the parts because they're proprietary to Stanley elevator.
Okay, thank you. And thank you all for the thankless work that you're doing. I do appreciate it. I know it's not easy, and you're doing yeoman's work out there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Bill, and thanks for coming up to the microphone so you could clarify the questions that I missed fully asking from the offline questioning. I appreciate that. Thank you. Currently, there's no one with their hands raised for additional comments. So I'll give folks a second to come up to the microphone. And Rita, go ahead.
Hi, it's Rita Blanchard, Barton Corner Road. Jim, I appreciated your presentation, clarified a couple things for me. And I know that we appreciated you attending the Concerned Taxpayers meeting and presenting us with an analysis back in January of the unsustainable taxes we're facing. So I just wanted to let you know you are appreciated.
Thank you. Jonathan Eck.
Thank you for your service. I think much of the venom directed at the school board, unfortunately, is misdirected. In my mind, the real issue here is a matter of a state funding problem. I appreciate that the deliberative process on the budget was lengthy. I think as strong as some of the others feel about their positions, I feel an equally strong opposition to the budget cuts, both as proposed and as some have advocated through motions to further reduce the budget. Could the school board describe the matters it considered in cutting the superintendent's proposed budget, given the significant impact of the cuts?
I don't know if Liz or Billy, I don't want to call on anybody, but I'm wondering who's best to address that.
Sure. Yeah, John, I can answer that question. I think in all the years that I had been on the school board, we had not had a significant cut like this. The total number on the floor from the school board in going to the budget committee was $300,000. It didn't feel good. It was difficult. It was a long night, and there were some serious things that we did not want to cut. But I knew, I knew the tone of the budget committee. I knew where the budget committee was trying to go, and we were trying to negotiate a budget where we could all sort of feel okay about, not great. So I think that the things that Steve tiered out were difficult to take. Particularly, the sixth grade, there are things that we don't want to be without, but we needed to make those cuts to try to, make this a palatable budget going forward. So it was a very, very difficult meeting. I think Rich Houston spoke to that from the budget committee, but we did end up getting this operating budget passed by 7 individuals who attend over 300 hours worth of meetings, that know their stuff, that ask questions, that go to school board meetings, that go to committee meetings. And we presented it and we got a majority vote. So that was a little bit of the process that went with reducing Steve's budgets. Now, keep in mind, not to labor on here, but Steve is also making decisions for cuts when his, when the buildings come to him. So it's cuts from January all the way to, or from November all the way to March, January all the way to March. Okay. Sorry. Thanks.
Jim, can I just add one thing to that as well? Thank you, Bill. And that is to, and thank you, Jonathan, for your comments, but is that one of the considerations that the board makes in the process between the time that the superintendent presents his budget to us and the time that the school board goes through their deliberations and determines what to put forth to the budget committee is a process of looking at those areas that may be in the discussion of reductions. And one of the biggest considerations we look at is risk. We ask the superintendent to provide to us information that also indicates a level of risk if those things get reduced, because as I think we try to strive and achieve, and that is that that students come first when we have these conversations. And although often these conversations are very difficult and impact one particular area of our operations or another, it's really important for the board to look at and assess what the risk of some of the reductions might be to not only our students, but also to our staff and to our community. So it's a multi-tiered approach, if you will. It's very it's not black and white with a pen and a big X across things. There's a lot of thought and consideration that goes into it. The superintendent puts a tremendous amount of thought into the areas that he feels can most absorb some impact of reduction. And so thank you. I think it's important for that part of the process to be communicated to the community as well.
Thanks for addressing that. And again, for the record, Jonathan Eck, Gould Hill Road.
Thank you. Suzanne Meyer, please.
Hi, I want to thank everyone for all their hard work. We appreciate you. I had a question. Could you answer what would happen if Article 4 and 5, if that failed, if both of them failed?
We'll start on Article 4 at the conclusion of Article 3, which looks like we should be getting to hopefully soon, unless people keep raising hands. But currently, I'd like to keep the conversation on the budget as opposed to moving on to Article 4, the teacher's contract.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. Dave Luno, please.
Great.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks very much. I just wanted to address a couple of comments that have come up. Jonathan just mentioned it as well with regards to the state support for public education. And I think Jim O'Brien will remember this pretty clearly. Probably about 10 years ago when I was board chair. And I think, Jim, you were select board chair, and there were some very significant cuts coming out of the Bill O'Brien legislature with regards to state contribution to the New Hampshire retirement system and how that was going to affect school districts and municipalities. And Jim, I remember you saying, "Oh yeah, it's not going from 35 to 25%; it's going straight to zero," which it actually did. And in the past year, I think we've seen a very significant shift in how the state looks at its obligation to public education, and in fact the House bill that resulted in the additional fiscal disparity funds that went out to numerous districts across the state, including Hopkinton, passed the House on a vote of 262 to 82. So very bipartisan, very much supporting the idea and very much recognizing the fact that that school districts need additional support from the state. And that was ultimately incorporated into the governor's budget that passed on a nearly unanimous vote. So what that's actually led to is the establishment of the Commission to Study School Funding in the state, and Representative Myler and I are both on that commission. And there's a very serious inquiry going on right now in terms of how the state should go fairly fund school districts based on what our constitutional obligations are, and based on the court decisions, both Claremont and actually ongoing litigation with the Conval suit. So I just wanted to sort of address that because it's come up a couple of times. It's very significant, and I hope people will, despite COVID-19 and everything else that everybody's got on their mind, tune into the work that the School Funding Commission is doing. So thank you very much, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Let's go to Diane LaChance next.
Hi, this is Diane LaChance from Amesbury Road. I'd like to say a little bit about what was said about the Budget Committee and the number of hours that they spend to prepare this budget. And those numbers are real. There are many, many hours. But my viewpoint on it, I didn't attend to any this year. I pretty much got fed up with it, but I've spent many years going to all of the Budget Committee meetings. And I think the number of hours that are spent are due directly to a very complicated budget that does not clearly state how the school spends the money on a programmatic basis. 2 years ago, the Budget Committee almost unanimously agreed and requested from the school board a programmatic budget. It was a long process. They came up with a framework, but they never produced the programmatic budget. I still don't understand why the Budget Committee accepted the same budget they present every year, year after year. And that year we had a parent get up very frustrated and expressing that we can't understand the budget. We just have to believe them. I about fell off my chair. That was just the saddest day for me, that parents feel that they just have to believe it. That is not the democratic process. And I would just appeal to people to pursue that again, to get that programmatic budget so that we know. And when the school says they have to cut some things in the budget during these meetings, the next year we can actually look at it and we can see that that's what they did, or maybe they thought of something better or something that needed to be done else in another way. but we clearly understand that. I'm not in favor of the state, funding more education until towns understand these things. I hope David Luna will consider that as well in the state, and better understanding exactly where the dollars are going and what programs before we throw more money at this. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go on to Dennis.
Mr. Moderator, can I respond just very
sure.
quickly to Ms. LaChance's comments, because she's absolutely right. I was on the budget committee several years ago, representing the school board, and spent many hours in the room with Diane, attending meetings, asking questions. And on the programmatic budget, so the school board did work very closely with the budget committee on producing, understanding the request of a programmatic budget, and then producing a programmatic budget in consultation and cooperation with the budget committee. The budget committee isn't one person, it's a committee. And so I think there are different ideas on what they wanted. And so we asked for clarity. They provided us in writing several times, through motion several times, exactly what they want. The administration worked to put together that programmatic budget, which answered and met those needs. And so I don't want to leave this saying that, or with the thought that the board ignored it or we didn't move forward. We moved forward with the programmatic budget. We got agreement with the budget committee, what would be in it. We produced it. We worked with them on it, and it's still a document that we can produce, bring forward. And so I just, again, wanted to ensure people that we did work with the budget committee on a programmatic budget.
Thank you for that clarification. Let's move on now to Dennis. Oh, he just put his hand up. Wait a minute, what's going on here? Sorry about that, Dennis. We'll get you over here in a sec. There you are. You can unmute yourself. Go ahead, Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I appreciate it's getting late, so I'll be really quick, but
could you just please quickly state name and address?
Dennis Goddard, Hopkinton, of course I'm Hopkinton, Pennacook Road.
Thank you.
Just really briefly, I want to give my perspective on this issue. We are going through what I think is, in my opinion, just the worst way to fund any kind of thing that's important, because we are all trying to get together to come up with the budget for the school, inherently implying that there is a monopoly on education, that only one source of education shall happen. And I find that to be extremely useless, or to be extremely counterproductive. It is, to my mind, as illogical as trying to find the correct household budget for the car. If we were to come up with the car budget for every household in Hopkinton and maybe try to adjust it based on how big your house is, we would all recognize that as absolutely the wrong way to go about it. Everybody has different needs. It's true that all the children do need to be educated, but all the children need food too. And somehow we don't have to come up with the food budget for every town, for every household in the town. The entire mindset that says we have to socialize education and have only one provider of education, and that the local municipal government will be the monopoly that produces that, that is what drives neighbor against neighbor and causes so much vitriol. Because at the end of the day, whoever wins the vote, you need to understand it's not going to make people pay more because they have to, or because they feel like it, or because they're it's because when the vote happens, Chief Pecora will show up at your house with a gun and make you pay or take your house away. The people who are wanting a higher budget need to understand that from a moral basis, you frankly should be on all fours begging contrition, or really having to defend yourselves with why you think that your school is so important that the only good way to get the money for it is with armed force to anyone who refuses to pay what someone else considered the appropriate amount. It's just the wrong way to foster a friendly debate. It's what we're left with. It's nothing that you can change right now, but I really want to get across that this procedure is inherently not respectful of the community. So there we go. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, let's go to Jonathan Cohen, please.
Okay, so can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. So Jonathan Cohen, 88 School Street. So I am a member of the Budget Committee, but I am not speaking on behalf of the Budget Committee. I'm speaking simply as a member of the town. I support the budget as proposed by the school board, as I did on the Budget Committee, because I support the excellent public education that our town provides to its children. The proposed budget initially proposed by the superintendent was significantly cut by the school board, as has been discussed tonight. It is a very lean budget. And if it is cut further, the education that our children receive will be drastically affected. The biggest driver of the budget is wages and benefits. And if the budget is further reduced, this will mean a reduction, either an increase in class size and or a reduction in services for our children. I don't think there's any other way around that. And I think with the current situation, one thing that all of us with children are learning is that trying to watch your children and educate your children is an extremely hard job. Teachers have a really hard job. And if class sizes balloon, if services are reduced, then what you're going to have is an expansion of the distance between the haves and the have-nots in our community. And the people that are going to be disproportionately harmed by this are the children who need the most help. Wealthy families will be able to hire private tutors. They'll be able to take advantage of private clubs. They'll be able to provide services to their children. Public education is for all of the children in the town. And I just feel that we can't cut our school budget enough to solve the problem of the lack of adequate education coming from the state, of the lack of funding. There isn't enough cuts there to solve that problem. So I will be voting to support the budget, and I hope that the other members of this community vote the same way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ken, do you have a new comment to make?
And again, I'll make it short, but people are talking about the safety and well-being.
Ken, could you just state your name?
Sorry, I forgot it again.
That's okay.
After about 75 or 80 of these, when I'm truly dragging my cane in, I might remember to say I'm Ken Wasson from Clark Lane.
Thank you. And I may remember that too.
Yeah, you know it now, but anyways, people are talking about the safety and the well-being of the kids. The problem is that this school budget keeps going up, and the safety of the well-being of the people that are not in school. Briar Hill Road, that road was designed by a dentist because it's ridiculous, but we can't raise the money to fix that road because we got to pay for our school. And that's just wrong, that we have to take the safety of our citizens away. And I'm not sure what this safety is that several of the school board members mentioned. I don't think that school is unsafe in any way, shape, or form, but I think that we need to realize that there needs to be a compromise. And that is not a word that I think that any board in Hopkinton has realized in recent history, is a compromise. You got to step down. And the fact that this budget that was approved by the school board is a significant reduction from what the superintendent proposed makes me wonder why we have this superintendent, because that's ridiculous that he proposed something higher I mean, is this a negotiating theory between the superintendent and the school board? That's not where we are in this town. We need to have a compromise. We need to realize what we need to do in town and in the school and make that work. And as I said earlier, perhaps the senior executives in our school system need to go away. So again, Ken Wasson, Clark Lane, thank you.
Thank you very much. Patty McMillan.
Hello.
Yes.
This is Rick. This is
Hello.
Rick. So once again, you know, there's nothing, your job as the school board in particular, is outrageously difficult in these times. And I get that. I don't necessarily dislike any one of you per se, and you're now in this position, and I get the position you're in. I've been in town long enough to know why you're in the position you're in. And it has to do with all of the people and all of the things that came in the last 20 or 30 years before you, culminating in the situation that we're in right now. This town is known for never saying no to any school board budget ever. Those of us that have been here 10, 20, 30, 40 years know that. The other side of that is the revenue side. And any of us that have been here for any length of time, remember 30, 40 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, this town has always been a town to vote down any potential income business because they wanted it to be a sleepy little town where everybody could just hang out. So the 40 years of that, which is not your fault, has to do with the fact that we don't have any business revenue like Exit 9 Warner has, like Henniker has with Pat's Peak and all the businesses off 114, and so on and so forth. So yes, we're in a bad situation. I feel bad for you having to be on the board during this horrible time. But the reality is that all of the increases prior to you are a reality. It's a reality. It happened. If you want to learn, honestly, I think you should go back a while to see what happened before you. Where did this all go awry? So that being said, the other comment I did want to make was somebody a long time ago that made a comment about some kind of a projection. And this is another thing where I feel that things have gone awry with the school budget. And it has to do with the fact that I've run a business pretty much my entire life. It's been a family business in town since 1957 that was here. And you get your money from the taxpayers. I had to get my money from the bank. When I needed to make changes, when I needed money to move ahead, I got my money from the bank. To get money from the bank, I had to give a 3-year projection. And every year I had to give a 3-year budget projection. It was just part of business. I was not going to get money without a 3-year projection. So whoever was talking about setting up a 3-year projection or 2-year or whatever, I'm fully in agreement with that. And I think because we didn't have 3-year projections and we didn't have any understanding what the budget is, that looking at it in such a minute space, the 1 year at a time budget, that it went up an inch, 1 year at a time, then it went up 3 inches, and it just, all it's ever done is go up. There's no future vision. So we, the voters, ended up in this position of where we're wondering how to pay our taxes. So those things, I understand where you are. I understand where this came from because I've been watching it for years, and I feel bad for you. And yet I as many are just at my wit's end about how I could possibly retire and stay in this town after being here since 1957. And that's my problem. I get it, but I love this town. I went to school in this town. I had 2 kids go to school.
We've gone over 3 minutes, so please wrap it up soon.
All right, you guys are all awesome. Have a nice night.
Thank you very much. Ron. And after Ron, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next article.
Hey, James. Yeah, I shot you an email a couple days back and just commending you for how you're able to adapt and run all of these things
I'm sorry, Ron.
digitally.
Could you just state your name and address for the minutes, please?
Yes. Yep. Ron Noyes, 849 Main Street. And thank you again, James. You've done a remarkable job in facilitating all of this. It's incredible. I do want to note that there was a comment made about reduction in services for children, and it comes down to the have and haves nots. If you're in support of raising taxes, and I think it's prudent to pause on that and let's think about that for a second. The only people who have haves are not those children with needs. So are we going to cut the legs out from underneath those who have and have needs and means from under those who don't? There are people in town who do not have means. And if we increase taxes on them, how are they going to provide those services? They're not going to be able to. And so when we look at the true definition of services, I don't necessarily think it's all inclusive in only what happens at the school. It's what happens at the home. It's what happens on the stress level at the home when people can't pay those. It happens on the backs of the elderly and disabled on fixed incomes and minimal income. So I do want to just bring clarification when it comes to reductions in services for our children between the haves and have-nots, because in reality, the only people who have school choice to send their kids to these rich private schools are the haves. I'm advocating for the have-nots. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, I'm going to close comments on Article 3, the budget, and move on to Article 4, the teacher's contract.
Oh, James, can we, looks like Jim's raising his hand.
Okay, go ahead, Jim.
I'm sorry, James, Mr. Moderator. I feel remiss if I didn't state one more thing, because I wasn't sure how you were going to facilitate this. And so rather than amendment by amendment, which I understand, I'm not complaining. I wanted to make sure I got a comment in before we closed. And this has to do with, and I don't want to speak to the specific amendments and dollar amounts, but I just want to speak to some of the large reductions to the budgets that have come forward in some of the amendments. And I just want to speak to the ramifications of some of those large reductions.
I think that would be wholly appropriate. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. And again, I'm not going to speak to too much detail. But you know, this is a public school. We serve all students who come in, and we meet the needs of all students. And that comes across the boards, from students who are very advanced and have higher educational, to students who struggle and have all sorts of different educational needs. Our job as a district is to meet all those needs as best we can, to care for each child and to see them succeed. And for some of these budget reductions in these amendments, I think would have drastic consequences. And when I say drastic consequences, I think what it means is, as a district, we couldn't fulfill the needs that we're obligated to meet by federal and state statute. It would be a reduction that we wouldn't be able to meet those needs. And this isn't a scare tactic. This is the truth. The facts are scary sometimes. And the fact is, if some of these reductions were to go through, I think, as chair of the board, I'm trying to, I would just tell you now, we wouldn't be able to meet those statutory requirements. And the district would be taken to court, and that would be rightly so. Those advocates for children have a right to these needs that we wouldn't be able to meet, and the district would lose. And then will we be spending money on lawyers and coming back to make additional appropriations? And so I really do, I've been serving on boards here in town for 13, 14 years now. I understand the different abilities of our residents to pay taxes. I understand the times we're in. I was on the board during the 2008, 2009 recession. I get it. And I also, I just want to be honest that some of these reductions are so dramatic that it wouldn't just change the face of the district. We just wouldn't be able to meet the needs of the students in our schools. And that has both, in my view, it has both moral consequences, but it really has legal consequences for this district. And so, again, as people go to vote tomorrow, I really just want people to keep that in mind, that some of these reductions are very dramatic. And if they were to pass, there are real consequences to the district. They really do put the district at risk, and it's legal risk. And so anyway, I don't want to keep going on, but I didn't want this meeting to end without at least some comments on some of these amendments that that would really dramatically, it's not just change the district, but it would put us in some real legal risk that we would lose. And there would be consequences to that, both to children and to the district, our reputation and how we function.
Thank you, Jim. Moving on to Article 4, oh, sorry, Liz.
That's okay. I just thought I would throw my hand up one last chance for one last say on the operating budget. And I sort of held my comments to the very end in order to be able to listen to everybody who provided comments tonight, which I am very grateful that we have some very engaged community members who are you know, very thoughtful in their comments and how they feel. And I guess I just want to sort of wrap up my sort of final say, if you will, as part of the school board. And after serving 12 years on the board, I've been through a lot of what I hear community members referring to. And I think that one of the things in some reflection that I've had the ability to do in the last month and a half or so since stepping off the board is that there are always times when we don't always have the ability to anticipate. Being a public school system, we are every year looking at scenarios that change from week to week, month to month, year to year. Our student body changes when families move into the community and families move out. And I think one of the things that I've learned over the 12 years, and I've learned a lot of that from Steve, from our leadership, is that what has to prevail through all of this is thought leadership. And one of the things that we've done in the last 12 years is to really solidify that thought leadership with Steve. And with that, there come changes. We've gone from a time when we thought we had declining enrollment, that we were going to be able to go to 2 buildings in this district, to quickly having to pivot when we found that the projections for our enrollment actually were going to be increasing. So, you know, you find yourself in situations from year to year having to look at things differently, to approach things creatively, to find ways to meet the needs of the community. And I mean everybody in the community, not just students. Of course, you know, we always are putting our thoughts around what is best for kids first. And what allows us to be able to do that is an amazing community that supports education. And when I moved to this community, that was what brought us to this community, was a community as a whole that supported education. It doesn't mean it's difficult. We don't always have to agree. But I will say that one of the things that I think has got to remain at the forefront of the work that we do is respect for one another all the way through. Our employees, our district management, our school board members, our budget committee members, our select board members. There's got to be civility and respect at meetings, at town meetings, school district meetings, in order for us to help solve some of these challenges together. So, you know, I think that this budget that was developed through September through February, essentially, once it went through the budget committee hearing, is one that allows us to provide an education that this community expects at this juncture. And aside from the fact that I feel we had to hand over a board to 3 new board members at probably one of the most challenging times, and my hat is off to them for really, really, you know, having to sort of step up very quickly to start solving more challenges creatively. Is really commendable to them. So, and the leadership in our buildings and our district. So thank you for allowing me to share that tonight. And so I appreciate that.
Thank you, Liz. Now I'm going to move on to Article 4. For comments, there were repeated requests for amendment to reduce Articles 4, 6, 8, and through 11 down to 0. As I said earlier, Articles 4 and 6 as contracts are not allowed to be amended. And for the other requests, a no vote is the correct procedure to not fund the article, so no amendment is needed. Another comment was made on Articles 4 through 11, stating that if rejected, education won't stop and salaries will be paid and benefits will be received. This voter will be voting no on these articles with possible support for the Teamsters contract due to lower salaries and benefit packages. I received 2 questions on Article 4. The first, please clarify the tax impact for all years of the contract. I guess that's probably both cumulatively and annually.
Is that, I guess, Steve, is that something that you have the answer, or Michelle?
Sure, it's on so the way that the tax impact is determined on a collective bargaining agreement is you fix a line in time and you take an employee draw at that moment. And so we, working with in negotiations, we say anybody hired as of like September 1st, and you fix the salary and the salary and benefit packages based on that time. And then 273A governs negotiations, and we're required by law to negotiate in good faith. And that is where you go back and forth and figure out some benefit changes and salaries to get to a certain spot. And then that is quantified by specific employee at that time. So everybody, while 100 employees salaries determined and benefit based on 2-person, single or family, exactly what it would be, Michelle costs that out. And one thing we know is that is a moment in time, but it does change over time. And so that and it's listed on the article, and I can find the article pretty quick, but each year it's called Samburnizing. So we must announce at that time what each year's value of the prospective increase would be. And that is determined for the first year, I think it's 40 cents, Michelle, does that sound right? And the subsequent, the tax impact of the other years are still estimates because things change very significantly, plan changes as well as number of personnel and hire and exchange. So it's an estimate each year what it would be, and we determine the first year is 40 cents, but it does change throughout the process. I don't know if that was helpful.
I hope so. We'll find out if they're still on the call and want to follow up. The next question is, what happens to the teachers if the contract is rejected?
So I'm going to take that.
No, please do.
So so we are not an evergreen contract. So what that means is it is frozen in time. The salary would be frozen and the benefits would be frozen. So there is no step increase because we are not what's called an evergreen, where steps are entitled regardless of the passing of a contract. So a teacher who is on a bachelor's step 3 would be on bachelor's step 3 next year. There would be no progressive. The only question, and Michelle and I talked about it, and maybe Rob remembers from his time, is degree obtainment. I think you may advance in degree attainment, but you don't advance on time served. You don't get years, and nothing else changes. Rob, does that sound familiar to you? That if you get degrees, you do get the degree advancement, but not years. Michelle and I were talking about it the other day.
I think that is correct, Steve, that classifies as a change in placement, and therefore it's a move over. It'd be like, hiring a new person.
Yeah. So degree advancement changes, but that's it. Everything else is frozen.
And if I could just jump in just very quickly, I mean, the other thing that happens is, the hard work and negotiations that went into getting a contract to bring forward, we would lose that. And so part of the negotiations was, a change in how the employer health insurance premiums get paid. And so a lot of that would all be gone. And so the board would have to go back to the negotiating table with the unions. And so again, that doesn't directly answer the question, but I think that's a ramification if the article fails.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to open it up to comments, and it looks like Rita has her hand up.
Hi, Rita Blanchard, Barton Corner Road. I just have a quick question. Do we know how many single marital status teachers do we employ? Guesstimate. I'll take a guess.
And that's probably a question for Steve or Michelle.
Geez, if I had to guess, I'd say 20%, 20. It is 10 to 20, something like that. I mean, it's a tough one for me to guess, Rita, to be honest with you.
Steve, you're probably not allowed to ask that during the hiring process or anything like that, are you?
No,
yeah.
but he would know. He should know his employees. Because I'm just curious, and I know there's a difference between a single health plan, a couple's health plan, and a family health plan. And the family health plan is pretty expensive, having had one for many years. My other question is, we talked about contracted employees, and I'm just curious, what happens to the employees we have that are not under that Teamsters contract? Do they automatically get a raise and a bonus and everything else?
Do you want me to?
Yeah, please.
So there's different classifications of employee. We have HES, Hopkinton Education Support Staff. They have an approved contract, so they would advance as the contract is approved. Teamsters and teachers are on here. If those aren't approved, then those are frozen in time. And then there's the other classification of employee, which is considered non-union, in which there is no, that is a year to year, and the school board, along with the administration, determines salary increases for those. There is no entitlement. It is just, there's no contract. It is case by case. So those are the different classes of employees we have in the district.
Okay, so anybody, so if we vote the school budget down and we vote the teacher's contract down, there are still people who can be given a raise. Correct?
The support staff are, because they will be in a second year of a third year contract, will get their negotiated, which was
right.
approved.
No, I understand. I understand about contracted employees, that contract, we can't nullify that contract. But I know the teachers don't have contracts, and I know there's employees who are not contracted. So
Yes.
I'm going to know, well, if we vote that teacher contract down, they're froze. But those non-contracted employees, do they get a raise? Yes or no?
It's at the discretion of the board, Rita.
And when would that decision be made?
We do evaluations, and we would set a merit pool and plan accordingly.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Seeing no other hands raised, we'll move on to Article 5. I received no comments or questions on Article 5. Are there any questions from the attendees of the meeting? Seeing none. Article 6, the Teamsters contract. I received no additional comments or questions other than the comments I made earlier that apply to multiple contract or multiple articles. Are there any other comments from the attendees of the meeting? Seeing none. Oh, okay, Ron. You can unmute yourself. Yep, go ahead.
All good. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Cool. So I just want to thank Jim for pointing that out, because I worked in education. I worked in special needs education for a long time. And I know that we're talking about broad things and all that. But if someone were to propose a 50% slash, all of those legal ramifications that Jim mentioned are true. They're 100% true. And those are things that we really have to be mindful of. And for that fact, that's why I'm not advocating for a 50% reduction or 20% reduction. I would encourage people to hold the line and let's have a flat budget. If you feel like you learned something from other people and you wish to reduce it like a little bit more, that's okay.
Thank you, Ron. But I think we've moved on from the budget. We're trying to get on to, I'm trying to get comments on Article 6, the Teamsters contract now. We've moved
that's
along.
fine. Just wanted to put that on the record. Thank you, James.
Okay, thank you. And that was Ron Noyes. He stated his address in earlier comments. So any other comments on the Teamsters contract? Seeing none. Any comments on Article 7, the special meeting if the Teamsters contract article fails? Seeing none, we will move on to At least I'm assuming that's none. Ron, if you have another comment, or you could lower your hand if you're all set. We'll move on to, thank you. We will move on to Article 8 for the General Contingency Fund. I received 0 comments and 0 questions. Any comments from the meeting? Seeing none. Article 9 for the School District Repair and Maintenance Fund. I received 0 comments and 0 questions. Any comments from the meeting? Seeing none. Article 10, Special Education Expendable Trust Fund. I received 0 comments, 0 questions. Any comments from the meeting? Seeing none. Article 11 for the replacing the school district vehicles capital reserve fund. I received no comments or no questions. Anything from the meeting? Seeing none. Article 12, I did receive a couple of comments on. A couple of comments were made to me to say thank you to the board and those involved in setting the meeting on Tuesday. Another requested an amendment that would assure that from this year forward, that all school board meetings be held via two-way interactive format, such as a Zoom program being utilized this year. The second part of the amendment would have the school board assign someone to monitor the chat separately, essentially monitoring the chat function and selecting appropriate issues to then forward to the school board for open discussion with those in attendance. This motion was not placed on the ballot because even if passed, it would not have been valid or binding. This meeting for the annual meeting cannot bind the actions of the school board in that manner. Additionally, the subject matter was not properly warned in the warrant. If the motion, on the other hand, was trying to alter the way this meeting is held in the future, this meeting is not able to bind future meetings, and the subject matter was not properly warned, and it would be in violation of RSA 40:4, which provides the moderator the ability to set the rules of the meeting, which can then be overturned. Are there any other additional comments to Article 12? Jim, we'll start with you.
Sure. Just so that last question, while I understand your ruling on that, just so everybody does know that under the state of emergency, that the school board is conducting all its meetings in the two-way Zoom. So people who do wish to participate can log in and participate in our meetings as they would at any other school board meeting, except you're not in a room, you're on Zoom. So I think we've accomplished what that person has asked us to, at least in the current emergency situation. And the only other thing as we wrap up, I just want to thank Matt Belanger, Bill Chapin, and especially Liz Durant for joining us and for both for participating on Tuesday and seeing through the town meeting and the role that they've played to present the warrants, to stay engaged and to stay active both in the planning for this meeting and then active participation, and then joining again today to sort of help answer those questions and provide clarity on the warrants. It really is a testament to their wanting to serve the community and see the job through and to stay engaged. And so I just want to commend them and thank them for their guidance and their wisdom in helping us get to this point. And then I do want to thank and acknowledge the work of the current board. And as I started off the presentation earlier in Article 3, this board started pretty much when the state went into lockdown. Our district went into distance learning, and have really had to make a lot of challenging decisions very quickly, learn the ropes in a very different way than I know that I learned the ropes in my couple of years on the board, and have all been incredibly value add to the conversations that we've been having as a school board. And I could just honestly say that this has been, it felt like the longest year, but it's been the longest 2 months, I think, that I've had in my service on boards. And so I just, again, I just want to thank the members for their service and for volunteering to do this work. And then finally, I really want to just acknowledge both Michelle and Steve and the leadership team of our district, the teachers in our district. You know, just think, you know, over 2 months ago, our kids went to school as normal. You know, the elementary school students who woke up in the morning and wanted to go to school to see their friends and to participate with their teacher. That got all changed very rapidly, not only for the students who are profoundly affected by this change, but it changed for all the teachers. It changed for the administrators. They no longer had access to the children that they care for and have been teaching all year. They had to change how they conduct themselves. Their parents as well, they're at home trying to educate our children at the same time that they're trying to meet the needs of their children at home. You know, Steve and Michelle are running a district that where there's no people, there's no teachers in the building, there's no kids in the classroom. And this is profoundly challenging. It has profoundly changed in a short matter of time. It is really hard to think this has only been 2 months, but it's been amazing work to me, the witness. We're not in it day to day. We come in, try to be helpful from time to time, but to watch the incredible care and the incredible amount of work that our staff, our administrators, our teachers do on a day-to-day basis is amazing. And I couldn't let this pass up without acknowledging that. No matter what happens with this vote, it's been humbling to watch the actions that our leadership and our teachers make on a day-to-day basis. I couldn't be more proud of them. I couldn't be more proud of the effort that they're doing. So thank you. On behalf of the town, I want to thank our teachers and administrators.
Thank you very much. I would also just like to add, because I'm sure somebody would like to know this information, the Zoom attendance, I believe, peaked at about 197 and fluctuated slightly throughout different parts of the meeting. Steve, do you have a number on the YouTube side? If you unmute yourself.
So the high 123, 126 is the high.
Okay, so more so than the Tuesday, and many of these households, I'm sure, had multiple people watching. So we'll see how voter turnout tomorrow is, but I hope it'll be high. I'd also like to reiterate Jim's thanks to all the panelists and everyone behind the scenes, especially Matt Stone as well, helping with technology. And I'd also most like to thank you, the voters and residents of town, who without this meeting would be not nearly as meaningful and insightful, and it would be boring with me talking a lot more than I already have. So with that, I would thank you all. And as a reminder, voting will be open tomorrow at the high school from 9 to 1. Enter the Park Avenue side and entrance and pull around to the supervisor of the checklist. Get a ballot if you need one, or print it at home, 1 or 2 side, it doesn't matter, from the school district website. Please vote yes or no on all questions and amendments, motions, everything. Every set of ovals needs an answer. And both pages as well. When ready, you can ready to vote, drive up to the ballot box to cast your ballot, and I will post the results as soon as all of the ballots are counted and recounted for a result. They will be posted on the school district website, school district Facebook page, and most likely on the town's Facebook page as well. If you are planning on not driving to the meeting, you will not be turned away if you're running or walking. Please be safe in doing so, and we request that you wear a mask, and will require appropriate social distancing in that process. But driving is likely to be the safest manner for everyone involved. And with that, thank you very much for your interest and participation tonight. The 2020 Hopkinton School District meeting is now recessed until 9 a.m. tomorrow, Saturday, May 16th, for voting at the Hopkinton Middle High School. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. Great job.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Okay. I have
Jim O'Brien's best meeting ever.